To regular session. We just exited executive session, so I will begin this meeting with citizens' concerns. So if there's anybody who's here that would like to speak on an issue that is not otherwise on the agenda. Just please turn on the microphone and say your name and street.
When you say is not on the agenda, I'm here concerning the dog park.
So that is on the agenda, so you have to wait.
But will there be a comment period from individuals?
So these are just for items that are not on the agenda. Otherwise, we take comments as the items come.
No, I just wanted to be sure.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Anybody here for items not on the agenda? Okay, no citizens' concerns. Then we will move to the chairman's update. I have a brief update today. Just as a note, many people probably, hopefully, know that we started a bike share program with the Zagster bikes earlier this fall, and you've hopefully seen those both in West Acton and at the South Acton train station. And just as a note for anybody who is wondering where those went, they are offline until April. We take them off the roads in the winter, so they are not gone forever, just for a few months. The Senior Center will be having their annual countdown to the new year on December 31st, and they will be providing Chinese food for lunch as well as a sparkling cider toast, and they ring in the new year at noon. It's one of my favorite events of the year. All the members of the board have been invited, and hopefully many can attend. It's a fun time. Used to be called New Year's Eve, which I preferred that name. Speaking of the holidays, the town offices will be closed on Christmas and New Year's Day. This includes the library and town hall, but obviously not public safety services. And on behalf of the board, I'd like to wish everybody happy holidays, and we will see you next on Budget Saturday, which will be Saturday, January 5th, and then our next regularly scheduled Board of Selectmen meeting will be Monday, January 7th. Mr. Manager.
Thank you. I look forward to discussing with the board and the public the budget presentation later tonight.
Okay, we have a few minutes before our first hearing, so I'm going to do the consent agenda. So I'll read through these items. Please say hold if there are any items that you would like to hold. So number 9, accept gift natural resources. Board to accept a gift totaling $121 from Jonathan Gong as part of his Eagle Scout fundraiser for project costs for building a wooden kiosk at the Acton Arboretum. Number 10, a fee increase recommendation for the Recreation Department. Number 11, accept gift for the Recreation Department. Number 12, committee appointment. Oh, Janet, you told me the pronunciation. Thank you. Thank you. Full member for the Conservation Commission. Thank you for clarifying that. Number 13, accept gift council on aging, a gift totaling $250 from Cynthia Newbold for building furnishings at the Senior Center. And number 14, multiple one-day alcoholic beverage licenses for Theater 3.
Move to approve consent agenda items 9 through 14.
Okay, Janet has made a motion, and Joan seconds. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. It is close to 7:10, so I'm going to read the notice for our first public hearing. Notice is hereby given under Chapter 138, Section 12 of the General Laws that the Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room 204 in the Acton Town Hall, 472 Main Street, Acton, on December 17th, 2018 at 7:10 p.m. on the application of an all-alcohol license transfer from SVR Group Foods, Inc. to Mayuri Exotic Foods, Inc., located at 508 Nagog Park, Acton. The application is on file in the Selectman's office and may be viewed during normal working hours. Is there anybody here from the applicant? Okay, in fairness, I will give them until 7:10, which is a couple more minutes. I'm trying to think if we have anything else that's pretty quick.
Madam
Sure.
Chairman, are you going to allow time for people to announce what their plans are for the
Oh, I
board?
forgot about that. Sure, you want to do that now? Would you like to start?
Sure. All right, I'll start. I have prepared remarks. A lot of people probably have already heard about this through the grapevine, but this is my formal announcement. Excuse me, that I will not be running for another term. I've served on the Board of Selectmen for 9 years and will step down next April after 2019 annual town meeting. Although some people in town would like me to reconsider, I'm ready to move on. It has been a privilege and a delight to serve. The experience has been far better than I imagined when I first ran for the board in a contested race in 2010. I highly recommend contested races. Back in 2010, I was quite sure I could handle the job, but as a lifelong introvert, I wondered if I were up to the campaigning, especially the public speaking. But campaigning was a blast, including and maybe especially the public speaking. As for the responsibilities of the board, I have truly enjoyed the diversity of the work with issues and challenges that seem so much richer and just plain old more interesting than what I might have done if I had continued practicing management side employment law. And I also have relished the opportunity to meet and get to know so many people from different walks of life and with widely varying passions and interests, but all caring about the well-being of our community. I certainly will miss working with the town manager and town staff members. Anyone who knows me knows that I am not one to offer insincere flattery. So when I say that Acton has a fabulous group of town employees providing the services that residents and businesses count on, I mean it. During the past 9 years and 5 years before that, as a member of the Conservation Commission, I've had the pleasure of working with many town employees and deeply appreciate all they have done and continue to do to support the board, other town committees in the town. I would add that a fun extra of being on the board has been the opportunity to work with college classmates Steve Anderson and his law firm who serve as town council. I don't know what's next, but we'll take some time after 2019 annual town meeting to consider my options. In the meantime, I won't be going anywhere, given that my husband and I have a newly renovated kitchen and look forward to making full use of it. Thanks from the bottom of my heart to residents, town managers Mongerati and Ledoux, and town employees and my colleagues over the years for a really excellent 9-year adventure.
Despite the fact that I'm the one that said we should do this on the 17th, I forgot to write down my thoughts. So I will come back on January 7th with my formal announcement, but most people who are interested know my choice, and I will speak to it more on the 7th. So thank you, Shannon, for the reminder on that. Okay, I think it is 7:10 now, so is there anybody here from Mayority Exotic Foods? Okay, then did anybody have any questions on the application before us for the liquor license transfer? Members of the board? Nope. Is there anybody here from the audience who wished to comment on this item? Nope. Okay, then do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve the application for an all-alcohol license transfer from SVR Root Foods, Inc. to Mayuri Exotic Foods, Inc., located at 508 Nagog Park, Acton.
Does anybody want to second that motion? Okay. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I'm not going to vote in favor of the motion. I just don't feel comfortable voting, even though all the paperwork seems pretty straightforward. It's all the paperwork's in order. The staff of the town have not objected to it. I just don't feel comfortable voting on a liquor license transfer when the applicants haven't even bothered to show up.
Does anybody else have similar concerns? Joan does. I just want to make sure we have a...
Is this uncommon for an applicant in such a circumstance not to show up?
I'd say it's fairly uncommon. Typically, we have somebody
Let's
show up.
put it over then.
Okay. Lisa, do we typically remind people, or do they just, you tell them when their hearing date is? I spoke to them this afternoon. Oh, okay, and they're not here. Okay, then that's fair. So, Janet, you made a motion. Do you want to withdraw that, and maybe we...
I'll withdraw it, and
Okay.
we can hold off, thanks.
Okay, so I think we need a motion to, do we have to continue this, or, I mean, is it, okay, so then can I have a motion to continue it to January 7th, I assume? Do we have time on the 7th? Okay. Can I have a motion to continue to January 7th?
Move to continue the liquor license transfer of Mayuri Exotic Foods to January 7th, 2019.
Second?
Okay, John moved, Peter second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so we will let them know. Okay, the next one, 7:15. The Acton Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on December 17th, 2018 at 7:15 p.m. in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room 204, Town Hall 472 Main Street, Acton, on the application of Mayuri Exotic Cuisine, Inc. at 508 Nagog Park, Acton, under Section 140 of the Massachusetts General Laws for a common victualler license. This application can be expected at Town Hall during normal business hours. I assume nobody else has showed up in the interim, so would somebody like to make a similar motion to continue?
Move to continue the liquor license for,
This is common victualler,
I'm sorry,
common victualler license.
common vicular application to January 7th, 2019.
Okay, John moved and Joan seconded. Any other comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, this one is also for 7:15, so we will start with that. The Acton Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on December 17th, 2018 at 7:15 p.m. in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room, 204 at Town Hall, 472 Main Street, Acton, on the application of Carpenter Golf, 20 Main Street, Acton, for use special permit 110218-472, required under sections 3.5.159 and 10.3 of the Acton zoning bylaw. The application accompanying plans can be inspected at the Planning Division and Town Hall during normal business hours. Folks who just came in the back, were you here for the Maori Exotic Foods? Okay, so unfortunately we just... You want to undo it? Can we? I don't know though.
Can we move to vacate the,
Yeah, so
Okay.
we just heard yours, and we're concerned that you weren't here, so move to continue those hearings to January 7th. Now that you are here, if you want to come up and present to us, then we will make a motion to vacate those likely and move with proceeding it. So do you mind coming up and introducing yourselves? My watch runs fast is part of the problem. Do you mind just speaking in the microphone and saying your name? Sorry, we are on TV.
Sorry, we are a little late. Our clocks, were showing 7 o'clock, so we thought it was 7:15. My name is Jay. Vijay is the manager. He's right there. And we are at 508 Nagog Park, Maori Exotic Foods.
Okay, great. And you are applying both for the liquor license transfer and for the common victualler application?
Yes, we are.
Okay, were there any questions from members of the board on these applications? No, we just wanted to make sure you were here. Generally, we don't approve these if somebody's not present. So that's why we had originally moved to move them to the 7th. So does somebody, I think we could do this in maybe 2 motions. Do you want to start by moving to vacate the original 2 motions?
okay, I would move then to vacate the continuance of the liquor license transfer from Maori Exotic Foods from SRV Food Groups, Inc. to January 7, 2019, and to vacate the continuance of the common particular application of Maori Exotic Foods to January 7th, 2019.
Okay, John moved, Joan seconded. Any other comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, then can I have any motions on approving the applications?
Can I repeat the motion I made earlier?
Yeah.
A move to approve the application for an all-alcohol license transfer from SBR Group Foods, Inc. to Maori Exotic Foods, Inc., located at 508 Nagog Park, Acton.
Okay, Janet moved, Joan seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? And one more.
Move to approve the application of Maori Exotic Cuisine, Inc. at 508 Nagog Park, Acton, Mass. under Section 140 of the Mass General Laws for a common victualler license.
Okay, Janet moves, Joan seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much for coming.
thank you.
I apologize
Thank you so
for
much.
that rigmarole. And welcome to town. Okay, so back to where I just were. We are hopefully officially at 7:15. I have now read the hearing notice for the use special permit for 20 Main Street. So is there somebody here for that application? Yes, okay. Do you mind just coming up and introducing yourselves?
Chris Bernard.
John Anderson from 20 Main.
Okay, and do you want to just present a little bit about what you're requesting?
We're requesting a facility to teach golf to young people, and that's pretty much it.
Okay. Are there questions from members of the board? I just had a question. You're not changing the building, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, there was something, there were just drawings in there that, there was something that like looked like an expansion, existing building and new building addition. Does that just mean?
No, we pulled a building permit for it, but we took it, it's in the warehouse that's presently there. So
Yeah.
what you would probably see is the building that's there now, and then we had to do all new plans to accommodate the new tenant.
The new, okay, excellent. Okay, that made sense. Okay, otherwise I thought it looked great. Janet?
So you're not making any change to the existing parking?
We are not.
Okay. Have you given any consideration to including bike racks? We had a question from somebody in town about bike racks. I don't know, the planning department didn't even, I think, mention it in their draft decision about including bike racks, especially because that building location is not too far from where the Assabet River Rail Trail runs, and there may be some people who want to learn how to golf and bike with their clubs. No, I don't think so, but.
We had talked to the planning board about it before. We said we were going to give it a year for the rail trail to see how it works. It's working great so far. As you know, it goes right through the property.
Right.
And we're a little nervous at the beginning because of the parking and what people would come in, because to be honest, up until that, we never had any security problems, from at the building at all. And I think we just wanted to get a year out because we got a lot of comments that we're going to have security problems, we're going to have this, we're going to have that. And I think I can go back down to the planning board, and we've had a lot of requests from the employees in the building to be able to put bike racks there. So,
Good, so you're willing to consider it?
Absolutely.
After a year?
Yep,
Okay.
and we're almost there because they started in the spring. Even though it just opened, it's really people have been using it for a long time now.
No, that's fine. It's interesting when people are talking about bike trails, they start talking about security issues. And I don't know what people envision, that we're going to have Hell's Angels riding in on bicycles and, try terrorizing people in office buildings or people in residences. But yeah, we're talking about bicyclists. And as far as I know, the kind of criminal element typically isn't interested in going through the laborious process of riding a bicycle to get anywhere. So well, that's good. I mean, I accept that response. I'm not going to persuade you.
It's been excellent so far.
So you've been talking to the planning department?
I was.
Not the planning board, the planning department?
The planning, yeah.
The town planner, like
town
Roland
planner.
and Kristen?
It's Roland that we were talking to.
Yeah, he's the planning department.
And his assistant, I believe she's his assistant, I'm not sure. And I said, after a year, let's sit down and talk about it.
Guichard?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we were going to give it a year. We were still trying to digest a lot of traffic going through the building, and it just took a while. We've got the signs right now, and I think it's working out beautiful. Everybody loves it. You guys, they did a great job with it, I gotta tell you.
Okay. Great. That's all questions I have.
Questions from other members? Okay, I see a member of the public who would like to make a question or ask a question. Do you mind just allowing that? Thank you.
Jim Snyder Grant, 18 Half Moon Hill. So thank you, Janet, both for the question about bicycles and for, the 9 years. I just wanted to follow up a tiny bit about the bicycle thing. Usually when I see a special use permit before the Board of Selectmen, I glance at the plan and make sure that there's bicycle parking, because our zoning bylaw does say that, commercial establishments will have bicycle parking. There's a matter of discretion in the planning department about when to apply this. The current understanding is that it requires a change in parking to trigger the requirement for bicycle parking. An unfortunate side effect of that is that the growth of bicycle parking has been very, very slow since the passage of the bylaw in, the addition to the zoning bylaw back in 2014. So I wonder if the board might consider, probably not now because it's not really in the context of this permit, but in the future, consider giving some direction to the planning department via the town manager to explore how the requirement for bicycle parking that's clearly in our zoning bylaw can be more widely enforced, especially now that we have the two working bike paths. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Yes, I noticed the same thing, and then when I saw with planning hadn't brought it up, I assumed it was because it was an issue of a use special permit as opposed to the zoning with changing to the parking, but that is a point to consider. Yes, other public comment.
Tara Fredericks, West Acton. I'm in support of what Jim was saying. I also, under any special permits, we could, I believe, just with the vote of the Board of Selectmen, decide that it's policy to have bike racks for any special permit for commercial operations. Also, now, I had a question about this. Is this just a change of use for inside the building, or is this going to be golf instruction outside the building?
Oh, it's inside.
It's all inside,
Yeah,
so
it's
there's no
inside the
trees impacted, there's no golf balls flying all over the place?
No, it's inside a building.
Thank you.
Somebody who took golf lessons inside at college and ended up hitting somebody with a golf ball. It's not always safe inside either, but that requires somebody as bad at golf as I am. Okay, seeing no other questions, any other comments from members of the board? Seeing none, do we have a motion? Anybody? Thank you.
Move to approve the application of Carpenter Golf, 20 Main Street, Acton, for use special permit number 11/2/18-472, required under sections 3.5.15, paren 9, and 10.3 of the Acton zoning bylaw.
Okay, Janet moved.
Second.
I'll say Peter seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. All right, it is not quite time for our next hearing. So, Mr. Manager, do you want to do your budget presentation? Yes. Sure.
So Chris Carpenter's not here, he's the pro, so that's why I came. The one thing he mentioned to me is that I guess it takes a while for sometimes this to get signed, to get passed through.
I think it's on our
Okay.
desk right now.
He's just he's in his season, so if he
Sure.
could, that's all he's asking.
Yeah, we'll sign it tonight.
Perfect, thank you so much.
No problem. Yeah, Lisa's very on top of it, so, okay. You wanna? You got 35 minutes, so 35 minutes, I think. Yeah, we got till 8, so, yeah. All right, Mr. Manager.
Members of the board, I'm pleased to be here tonight to represent Town Manager's recommended municipal budget for fiscal year 20. It's been a lot of fun working on this with the staff, and they put a lot of time into it. And I look forward to your comments and your questions as we proceed into the budget process leading up to town meeting. So the big reveal is right there. The municipal operating budget that I'm recommending is an increase of 2.54% over fiscal year 19 when you include subsidies to enterprise funds and when you exclude free cash that I'm recommending being used for capital. So it's $35,186,539 to run all the wonderful services and programs that we provided last year and continue to do them very well next year. So in developing the goal, in developing the budget, we're working with some goals that we were considering. We really wanted to maintain level services while finding ways to improve through efficiency, collaboration, and innovation. We wanted to find ways to reduce our reliance on reserves, which I'll get into more later. We wanted to put together a budget that's consistent with the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, guidelines and best practices. And we wanted to continue the tradition of coordinating budget planning with the Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, and the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District through the Acton Leadership Group program. And of course, the budget that we're bringing forward is to be consistent with the Selectmen's short and long-term goals. So the budget that we're bringing forward is responsive to all the goals. I'll highlight a few. The number one goal is to secure funding for Kelly's Corner Infrastructure Project, which we are recommending to do in this budget. We are working on a preliminary capital plan. There's measures that to help with the environmental sustainability policy, tax relief programs, and we are looking at ways to address item number 7 in a recommendation or a request to the Community Preservation Committee. The long-term goals, Kelly Corner, North Acton Fire Station, we will be recommending in the long-term plan, and we're taking steps to help with identifying our carbon footprint through work that's already ongoing. So those were the goals that we used to do about the budget, and these are some of the challenges that we've faced in the development process. Some of you may have heard that our pension assessment from Middlesex County Retirement Board increased substantially this year. It's usually in the 6 or 7 or maybe 8% range. This year it was almost doubled, and at $544,000, that takes up a lot of the resources that we would look to use in a future year budget. So it created a challenge right out of the gate on how to accommodate that and still do all the other things that we need to do. Capital planning and debt management, in addition to looking at our long-term capital needs, we also need to make sure that the debt that we are paying for and has been authorized in the past is properly managed, so that as the debt schedules fall off, that additional debt is added, but it's not in a way that goes much higher than what we had before. And so that's been a challenge. New growth was a little slower last year than was projected. We do have some potential work going on right now with Insulet, some larger items that may help with that this year, but it's something that we're readjusting our expectations. Reductions in reserves, this is something that is a theme in the budget. We're looking to reduce our reliance on reserves because they have reduced a little bit, and we don't want that to go any further. Collective bargaining is a big part of planning for a budget. In this case, we have 5 contracts that will be expired before we enter the fiscal year. So that's a major consideration, understanding how we can fit those into the budget. And then transportation, it's a great program, but there are some costs that are associated with continuing to keep it running. We did increase hours on Wednesday afternoons at the senior center this year. We were looking to do a little more, and it's been a challenge to fit it in. So with reserves, the current reserve balance on the books right now is $4.6 million. That's $2.6 million in free cash, $2 million in our stabilization account. So it's about 4.8% of our total budget, if you consider the whole $96 million that was last year. Our Finance Committee publishes a point of view document every year, and in the document this year, it recommends that reserve levels should be between 5% of municipal operations and 5% of total budget, which is roughly 1.8 to 4.8. So we're right in where the Finance Committee recommends that we be, and the recommendations for next year will allow us to stay within that range. We are looking to decrease reserve use. Hopefully we have support for that going forward, and we're looking to use reserves for capital items. Which capital items? Whoops. So we're recommending appropriating $675,000 from free cash. That would be for Kelly's Corner design and for some sidewalks and traffic calming program expenses. Through the enterprise funds, we are proposing projects to look at the transfer station and do a feasibility study on some long-term facility improvements that are needed, look at some sewer feasibility design work related to potentially expanding the sewer system into West Acton and purchase some equipment for the ambulances, like an ALS monitor and a automatic stretcher. We're also funding some capital requests through the operating budget, as we often do, related to our reevaluation that we have to do every 5 years. And we're going to purchase some tasers for the police department and get training instituted into the budget to allow for everybody to be properly trained. So when you look at the operations for 20, if you look at the left column, this is a comparison to last year's budget. The operations are $34.7 million. The subsidies are $444,000. That makes for a total of $35 million, which is the first slide I showed you. Then when you add in the recommended capital that I'm recommending we use free cash to fund, the total spending is $35,861,539, which year over year is a 3.75% increase from last year. Some of the highlights in the budget that I'm recommending are funding the next phase in the Kelly's Corner design process, increasing the senior tax work program by 12%, reducing our reliance on reserves. Again, I said that's a theme. We're adding funding for sidewalks, increasing that funding amount by about 90% from what it was last year. We're including funding to fund a traffic calming program that we are looking to institute next year. Public Works, Public Safety, Planning, Engineering are putting together a traffic calming toolkit, which we hope to develop next year, and this would provide a resource to fund projects that are recommended from that work. As I mentioned, we're purchasing equipment for fire personnel, safety equipment, armor, actually, for our first responders that come in the ambulance or a fire truck. They often enter situations that are hazardous and requiring additional personal protective equipment. Another highlight, it's not something I'm excited about, but we're not recommending any new budgeted personnel next year. Other highlights, we are continuing our commitment to fund our OPEB liability. We have an excellent plan in place which would help eliminate our liability in about 20 years or less, I believe, is the total number. We are doing some feasibility study work on transportation, as I mentioned. We're doing some ADA trail maintenance at the Arboretum. And another thing I wanted to mention is that our team has really done a lot this year to pursue grants to help offset costs of providing services. And just within the last 4 months, we have over $500,000 in grants that we've brought into the organization. So that really helps. If you look at the 500 from Middlesex, that was a problem. But things like grants really help mitigate that problem. Whoops. So in planning the budget, I think we really need to be aware of, this is a good budget for FY20, but in future budgets, we need to be considering things that are coming down the line. Here's a few, the 53 River Street property, the old Rosaro paving. There's a dam on that property that's going to require some attention in the near future, and then whatever recommendations come from the committee would have potentially have funding implications. The 348 to 364 Main Street project, that may have budget implications, depends on what the community decides to do with that parcel or those parcels. The North Acton Fire Station, that's a project that the design was funded at the 2018 town meeting, and we are in the process of doing the design work right now, and we'll have a preliminary concept, hopefully, this summer, late summer, early fall. The school building projects, many of you are aware of the potential school project that's being discussed by the school district. I've already mentioned sewers. We are looking at the feasibility and the necessity of expanding the sewer system into West Acton. And the collective bargaining agreements, I think, will be an issue in the future as well. Legal expenses, our legal services budget, I didn't increase it this year. It's leveled, and I'm hoping that's going to be enough. But it's something that we're watching closely. And the Narrow Park, it's a great community resource. We all love it. It was one of the first things I did here was go to the 4th of July. But the 4th of July, as fun as it is, it requires a lot of resources from not just the rec department, from the whole organization. And we continue to manage it, but it's just something I wanted to put out there that it's a variable. And, this year, I could have 20 slides of things like this, but I just have a couple. On the top right is the opening of the Assabet River Rail Trail. The bottom right is the bike share launch earlier this fall. On the left is an example of some of the traffic calming and bicycle accommodations that we're doing throughout the town. That is called a sharrow. It's a picture of a bicycle on the side of the road, and it shows where the bike lane is or where the safe place is to travel for a cyclist. That truck right there, engine 21, is the new engine that you all bought last year at town meeting. It was delivered this fall, so we're excited to have that. And the police department's been doing a lot of work with community outreach with their Coffee with a Cop program. That's when they were at the Duncans earlier this summer. Celebrations, it's the 125th anniversary of the fire department this year, which was a lot of fun. They had a great community event. Despite the weather, it had a great turnout and a lot of fun. And it's nice to have a recognition like that. It was also the first year anniversary of our advanced life support service. This is a service that's increased the level of services for our residents. It's provided high level of care, much closer and faster than it had in the past. And then the Human Services and Senior Center building, we were in there a year. That's a great project. It's expanded programming in the Senior Center substantially, a lot more participation. There's great coordination of the functions of government that were in different parts of the town before. Now they're there together. We have a front desk that helps shepherd and understand where people are going and help people access services. And we have career counseling that started there, and we've enhanced our van service. Some other recognitions, our nursing service, again, received the Home Care Elite Agency Award in 2018, they do a great job in their home care. Officer Roderick Wiggins was named the Traffic Safety Hero of the Year by AAA earlier this year. Our finance group received a Certificate in Excellence for Financial Reporting from the GFOA. ActonTV, our local cable company, received an award for their program, Talk of the Town. It's like an Emmy, it's like a Grammy for local TV, so we're excited for them. And on the right, it's hard to see, but that's a life-saving award that was awarded to our seasonal staff at NARA, who did a great job and actually saved the life of a young child this summer. So a lot of great things happening this year. Also, every year, we recognize a town employee. At the town meeting earlier this year, we recognized Karen Switzer-Neff and Captain Scott Morse under the Joseph Lally Merit Award. The Selectmen also started a program to recognize volunteers. In 2018, the volunteers of the year were Bob Evans from the School and Finance Committee, Susan Mitchell-Hart from the Community Preservation Committee, Bill Clower from the Cemetery and Historical Commissions, Joe Will from the Recreation Commission, and Bob Guba from the Land Stewardship Committee. Thank you for your contributions. And thank you all for listening. That's the town manager's recommended budget.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manager, and congratulations on your first budget presentation. So you survived that part. Now I'll open it up if there are any questions from members of the board. Peter.
I'm very glad to see an increase in the sidewalk fund. That should help get some sidewalks built quicker around town. I'm glad you put down tasers as something that is a change. I can remember we got several years ago an email from a company that was selling tasers and encouraging the town to buy them. So I asked the former chief about that at Budget Saturday. He was opposed to tasers. He felt that they were had led to deaths in certain circumstances, and there were big safety issues. I think the town should know if our police officers are going to be carrying tasers. And a town meeting should be informed, affirmatively about that and be able to weigh in on it. And I certainly, I'm assuming that Chief Burrows has a lot of good reasons why he thinks that the police officers ought to be carrying tasers. But I think particularly in this atmosphere nationwide of what's happening with police departments, we need a very good explanation of why our officers would be carrying tasers. But I think the percentages are within the guidelines, and I know how hard that is to do. Thank you.
Okay. Janet, questions?
Yeah, I don't have very many questions. I know in talking to you, I think last Friday, I thought, oh, gee, I don't like these numbers. And I think that you did, as Peter alluded to, you did a really fine job of kind of focusing on the things that we really needed to do, controlling the use of reserves, focusing on capital items for the use of reserves, using the stabilization fund, which kind of had been, I don't know, we seemed to be building it and we weren't necessarily drawing it, and holding the line on, I know FTEs, town managers don't like to hold the line on that, but I think that you've managed to sort of hit all of the important things, and still, I mean, right now it would help to look at a piece of paper to look at the details, because I was writing like crazy, but anyhow, but I mean, I'm not outraged by what I see, but I not right now, because you're hitting all the high points, and of course I haven't seen what the impact is on the average assessed value house in Acton and the tax bill, but there's a lot of stuff that we have to cover, and I was expecting it to be worse. So right now I'm comparatively happy. So
Great. Just would you settle for a PDF copy, or would you like a paper copy?
Oh, PDF is fine.
All right, good.
Yeah.
So just to clarify.
I'm very modern.
Just to clarify, I'm not recommending that we
Right.
use funding from the stabilization account, but use other reserves, which is our free cash. But just to clarify. But thank you for not being outraged.
And to clarify for everybody who might not be familiar with the budget process, this is the first presentation of the town manager's budget. We will then receive the PDF of the budget details, the line item budget, and members of the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee spend our Christmas vacation or holiday break reviewing that in great detail, and then meet on Saturday, January 5th for an all-day budget Saturday meeting to review and talk to department heads and get more into the nitty-gritty. So don't be alarmed that we're, okaying a $35 million budget, with few questions tonight. But just so people know the process, this is the first time we've seen the town manager's proposal, and then we will see the details very shortly. Initial questions from John or Joan?
Sure. A very good, concise presentation. It was, my first budget too, so it's a new one. And I look forward to Budget Saturday and taking a hard look at the budget. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, again, Mr. Manager, thank you very much, and congratulations on your first budget presentation. Joan and I, having sat in ALG, have heard some of the challenges that the town has had to deal with this year, and overall that the town and school are going to have to deal with. Not only the issues with the Middlesex pension assessment, but also continuing to fund the Minuteman capital project through our operational budgets, as we're not doing a debt exclusion for that this year. So that's another chunk of money that is tough to eat within our operating budgets. So we're struggling with many things, and I've was, fearing that it would be an even higher increase. So I think that, as Janet said, it's not as, the 375 is not as large an increase over FY19 as it probably should have been, really, without, I know, you doing a lot of work to make that happen. And I'm really excited that as part of that, we're able to increase the senior tax work program. As you noted, one of our short-term goals is related to improving the use of our senior tax programs, and that is the one that I understand people are more comfortable using than some of the others that we offer, just because they are working, and so I think more people are willing to take that as opposed to feeling like it's a handout or something like that. And I know we're doing work to promote those other programs as well, but increasing the amount of money we put to that, I think, is a great thing. One question I just had initially, I know we'll get into the details over Budget Saturday, was just there was a decrease in the overall contribution to the enterprise subsidies. Was that to all of them, or is there one subsidy in particular that we're putting lower? And I know that fluctuates year to year, just depending on fund balances and that, but I was wondering if there's if you have a high level.
We are increasing the subsidy to transportation and
Okay.
decreasing the subsidy to ambulance.
Ambulance enterprise, okay. But still able to use some of the ambulance enterprise funding for some capital as well?
Yes, the capital items that are recommended for the ambulance equipment are from that account.
Do you think, and again, you don't have to answer this now, but is part of that ALS has been, that was part of what we had hoped when we switched over to ALS, is that it would improve the revenue into that fund? Have we noticed that? Is that part of why we're able to decrease the subsidy, do you think, or is it due to other?
I think it's partly that. We're still very cautious in reviewing the returns, as it's only been a year, September, so we haven't had a full fiscal year to really review. But it's definitely been a successful endeavor, and we hope that we can, sustain the levels of subsidy where they are without any trouble.
Great. And as Peter noted, I think this is, well within the recommendations or close to the recommendations of the Finance Committee, particularly the idea of using reserves only for capital expenses. So I'm generally supportive of it and look forward to getting into the details. So I will now open it up to public comment. Yeah, Janet.
Can I ask one question? You may have talked about this at ALG meetings, but I've been avoiding them like the plague in view of the complaints that have come our way about certain selectmen being there. But I had a question whether there was any sense of why the Middlesex assessment sort of jumped, sort of doubled, or is that just what happened?
Yeah, we're going to dig into that a little deeper on Budget Saturday, but generally, there was some increases in staff over the last 5 years, particularly in the police department. There was some 8 officers added about 3 or 4 years ago, and the Middlesex retirement has a 3-year look back, and so the spikes like that you don't really see right away. I think there was also some other transfers into the system, not me, other people, that may have impacted the assessment, but I think Steve Barrett has some bullet points to read on that.
And my only other comment is that all I could think is all the fun stuff that's going to be happening next year. And I'm just we'll read about it and hear about it, so good luck.
I think maybe you sent that around to ALG, but I know at some point there was a memo around the Middlesex with some more details around that. And part of it also is that people are living longer, so, and we're getting older as a staff. Okay, I will open up to the public.
Tara Fredericks, West Acton. I appreciate your statement readjusting our expectations relative to new growth. I think it's important to not pursue growth for growth's sake, but to pursue only growth that's specifically wanted. In fact, working regionally now, I noticed that in Stowe, their annual report breaks out the new growth and the permits by business, remodeling, both business and commercial and residential, and it's really interesting to watch that year over year as they try to get more good commercial local businesses as opposed to perhaps residential that they don't need. I agree with Peter about tasers. I'm very concerned about that. And I appreciate your comment about looking at the necessity of a West Acton sewer and rather than just deciding that we need it. And so then I get to my question about the Kelly's Corner design money that's included up in the capital expenditure, and I am curious as to whether this is planned to take place of a separate vote on Kelly's Corner design money.
So the recommendation is to fund the request from free cash, and I think the board will work on how to format the warrant leading up to town meeting. I expect it would be an article, but we certainly will have that conversation.
So I would like to have a placeholder in a citizen petition, the 10-signature citizen petition, to ensure that that vote is a separate vote at town meeting. Then I want to comment about the legal fees. So I definitely support the use, a strong legal budget, and not to be afraid of going to court, specifically for land use issues. I personally loved the idea of defending the CPA window funding, but I had a lot of feedback from constituents that said that no, in fact, that was an appropriate use of public funds. So I'm just urging you to keep strong on the land use stuff. That seems to have a lot of support in town. I remember when I was a selectman, I asked a selectman friend from Concord, why do you always get what you want over there? And she said, because we are prepared to go to court and if we don't like it. And because the developers know that they're prepared to go to court, they get more of what they want. So I hope that we pursue that same type of strategy. I want to thank you for mentioning the GFOA. It's really important to use the guidelines for the Government Finance Officers Association and the percentages that they recommend. I've pushed that for a long time. I would like to ask that we double the pay per hour for the senior work program. I was very surprised at how little we're paying the seniors that make it down here to work to try and get their tax monies. I think they should be paid $30 an hour. That's just my feeling. Then I want to thank you also for not having new employees come out of capital. I think that that's an inappropriate use of capital, of reserves. That should be for capital, one-time expenses. And I have a couple questions. Would you entertain a couple questions?
Well, I don't know if we'll answer them, but you can
Okay.
ask them.
So I want to know what you were planning for the senior tax relief. We worked really hard to get that to be more, and seniors come forward and use it. So there's very few people using it, and the money goes back into the budget each year. So I'm hoping to find out what that budget is so people know how much is available.
So the recommended budget includes an increase in the amount that we're going to pay for each senior worker. Right now, you can earn up to $1,260. $1,260 you can earn, and we're going to increase that number to $1,411. So it's about a 12% increase.
And I hope I urge you to increase that. I feel like I would like our seniors that if they're struggling enough to come down and work, that they should be able to work off half their taxes, in my opinion. And my last question, about the transfer station. I've always been very proud that the transfer station pays for itself. And so I was wondering why this particular time we were talking about getting design done under the, using reserves. And I thought that was odd since they seem to be always so self-sufficient.
So that's a good question, and I take the opportunity to clarify that the reserves that will be used are the reserves from the transfer station. So it is directly, directly from the revenue of the transfer station we'll be appropriating, we're recommending to appropriate funds to develop a long-term capital plan for that facility so that it maintains and so that it can be there.
Thank you very much. And my last comment is that if you put it to a vote whether people want to have the 4th of July celebration or spend more staff money pursuing the sewer expansion for a short number of people, I would say that people would vote for 4th of July. Thank you.
Typically, we do not do either or votes like that. Okay, any other comments from members of the public? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Manager, and we will look forward to reviewing those details over the holiday. It's not quite 8, but it's not long enough for the dog park committee, so I'm going to move down to the vote for the board to sign the agreement for 670 Massachusetts Avenue. Mr. Manager, do you want to take that?
Yes, we have someone for backup, but generally this is an agreement that council is recommending that the board sign to resolve a title issue with the property that's located at 670 Massachusetts Avenue. The title issues involve the Department of Housing and Community Development, the land court, and the town. And I think we've gotten to a place where everybody's satisfied with the course of action that includes requesting that the board sign this agreement, and then I believe we're going to seek a confirmatory vote at town meeting as a sort of a belt and suspenders approach to resolving this matter.
Yes. Thank you. Questions, Janet?
I mean, I don't know if anybody wants more of the background. It's Dan from the Regional Housing Services Office is here if you wanted to get a real quick overview of sort of the history of this property. I will say in short that anybody who drives down Mass Ave in West Acton and has seen the house with the blue, bright blue tarp roof, that's the house we're talking about. It has been tied up for over 10 years, and it has been in that condition with the blue tarp roof for probably 8 years or 7 years. There was a 70,000-gallon water leak in the house after the most recent owners had moved out in 2011 or 2010 maybe. So there's probably mold in addition to everything else. I mean, this is a knockdown candidate, but we're proposing to take it out of affordable housing stock and just get rid of it. So, but I would, if there's time.
I think we have the memo, so if
Yeah.
people have questions,
If people
I think
have
we could
questions
ask
of
those
Dan,
of
he's
Dan,
here.
right? But the memo
Yeah.
was quite clear, which was Nancy's way. Questions from other members of the board or comments? I'll just say, I think it was helpful to read this and to understand what we've also, now have in place to make sure issues like this aren't happening again, so people aren't getting underwater on these kinds of mortgages related to affordable units, and to note that the funding from the sale of a unit, where the specific amount will go into our affordable housing trust, so it will still be used to promote and provide affordable housing in town. So it made a lot of sense to me. Yes, Janet.
There also were, in the version of the agreement that was in our packet, there were some things that I thought were errors, and I was talking to Dan, and he said there was a red line version that came through this afternoon. I haven't seen it, but he said it corrected some of the things like paragraph, it's the big Roman numeral 2, subparagraph 4. There's a reference at the top of, I don't know what the page number is, just above Roman numeral 3 to 25E, which doesn't exist in the agreement. And then there's, but there were a couple of things that I just picked up that were really typos. And I just was wondering whether, and then in paragraph, Roman numeral paragraph 3, in paragraph 7, and the second sentence, there's like an extra word, I think, or no, the third sentence, fails to comply with, and it says with the any of the other, so there's an extra word in there that needs to come out. And then I think I would like to clarify with Dan that the purpose of paragraph 7, Roman numeral 3, is really to say that, acknowledge that the sale is probably going to be to not an eligible buyer, which would be somebody who would qualify under the affordable housing program, but it's going to be just to anybody who's in the market. And therefore, that essentially the agreement is that the lender is going to pay liquidated damages, which is in paragraph 7B. I had asked him that, but I thought it would be helpful to have that confirmed.
Sure, Dan, do you mind just coming up to
Yeah.
the microphone to thank you? And thank you for being here tonight.
Yes, my name is Dan Gallen. I work for the Regional Housing Services Office, which is for affordable housing professionals that are sort of paid from a intermunicipal cooperation agreement that Acton is, of course, first alphabetically out of 8 towns total. And the agreement has been, I received a red line this afternoon that actually was the bank's comments, but the bank's comments actually cleared up what Selectwoman Adachi had mentioned. My understanding is it's really 2 parts. It may still be sold to what's known as an eligible purchaser at the affordable price, which is 48.5% of the unrestricted market value. And an eligible purchaser is either somebody under 80% of median or a community group who would agree to sell to someone like that. I think both of those 2 options or scenarios are unlikely. I think the most likely occurrence is that a builder contractor will see this as a tear down opportunity and purchase, hopefully there'll be some spirited bidding, purchase it. The town will get the difference between the affordable price and whatever it gets bid up to.
And just to clarify, that affordable price, it's that 48.5%, and we would get whatever is above that?
Yeah, you would, there's, I don't know if the appraisal's been done yet. That's, I think, must be being handled by town council. But that'll be sort of, in essence, the strike price. So we can make up a number. Say its unrestricted price is $300,000. That, affordable price would be 145, 147, something like that. If it ends up selling for 200, whoever it is got a little bit of a bargain, and the town would get that difference between that affordable price of 50-something thousand, just pulling numbers out of the air.
And that, again, then that money goes into our Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So
Yes.
that's the part that
Yes.
made sense in here. Okay, excellent, thank you. Any other questions from members of the board? Okay, questions or comments from the public? Thank you, Dan. Do you mind just stepping aside? Sure. Thank you.
Chair Fredericks, West Acton. I would be really sad if this building got sold to a commercial buyer and the money went into the Affordable Housing Trust, which seeded a whole bunch of other building that I don't see as necessary. So that's one problem I see with this. The other thing is that if we're going to put an RFP out to sell the property, I believe it goes into the...
We're not putting out an RFP to sell the property.
So how do you sell the property?
It's a- Right, it's a foreclosure
It's a
sale.
foreclosure sale by who? Who forecloses on it?
The bank.
The banks, I see. So we don't actually own this. We
No.
only own this preservation or deed restriction on it.
Correct, we do not
Okay,
own
I see.
those.
Because I would think that it'd be an exciting project to put a number of little cottages on that property. And if we're in a position to buy that really cheap ourselves, not that we need another master planning committee for another piece of property, but I think that we have relationships with good developers that might be able to put something really attractive there that could be very affordable, single-family or cottage-like co-housing on that site. In fact, I think there's a co-housing group looking for a site in West Acton. So I urge us to, I know it's easy to just sign it and let it go, but it makes me very sad that that we would just do that without thinking a little more strategically. My last question is about the Affordable Housing Trust. Is the Affordable Housing Trust, is that ACHC's Affordable Housing Trust, or is there a
The
different?
Board of Selectmen has to approve uses of monies from the Affordable Housing Trust.
So we have Affordable Housing Trust?
Yeah, and we've approved uses.
Oh, that's
from it
great.
before.
How much money is in the Affordable Housing
I
Trust?
don't know off the top of my head, and I doubt
Okay.
anybody
Thank you,
here
I'll write in.
does.
Thanks so much.
And just to clarify, this has been going on for over a decade, so it's not something that we're just bringing up and trying to approve without having thought through the issue very carefully. Okay, so, yes, Janet.
I just wanted to add, Terry, you're in West Acton, and I have felt pity for the neighbors on either side of that house for 10 years because they've tried to sell the house, and you didn't have to come back to the microphone. I'm just making the point that it is a visual blight, okay? And there are people on either side of that house who have tried to sell their houses, and I felt terrible for them because you just know some prospective buyer is going to say, what's going on next door with that blue tarp roof? And the yard is neglected. The house is a mess. I'm surprised it hasn't collapsed. It is a real mess. It's, you know, and it really is. We tried, but, you know, thanks to 2008 and mortgage-backed securities and all the mess about trying to figure out who actually held the mortgage, you know, there was a lot of delay in resolving the issue. So, you know, it just, we could have resolved it before 2008, maybe, if things had worked out differently, but it was stretched out. And no, it's just, it's been hanging out there for 7-8 years with that blue tarp roof, looking like just really hideous, and anybody with any aesthetic sense would want it to change as quickly as possible, which is what we're doing.
Okay, I'm going to
Since I
take,
was
no, at this
named-
point, I'm going to take, unless you have, if you're responding to Janet's.
Yes, that's what I
No,
was-
and I'm not. That's what I'm saying, unless it's a new comment substantive. I'm taking a motion. Is there a motion on this item?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, Janet moves approved. This time I'll say John seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, knowing that we are after 8, I will read the hearing notice. The Acton Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on December 17th, 2018 at 8 p.m., continued from November 15th, 2018, in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room 204 at the Town Hall, 472 Main Street, Acton, on the application of CrossFit Reach Gym, 930 Main Street, Acton, for special use permit 0731-2018-469, required under sections 3.5.159 and 10.3 of the Acton zoning bylaw. The application and company plans can be inspected at the planning department and town hall during normal business hours. So, Robbie, I know there were a number of emails that we saw in the past few days and back and forth, and while I was not able to respond to everybody today, as I do also work a full-time job, I tried to get to as many as possible. But Robbie, do you want to come up and just maybe summarize what's happened since the continued hearing?
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, it's good to see everybody again. As you know, this is the third time here where I'm applying for the special use permit for CrossFit Reach. I've been in business for 9 years in Acton, serving a lot of community members, many of which I'm sure emailed you today, and as well as we do have a lot of members here in attendance as well in support of this permit. So since we last met, I did meet with John, and I met with Robert and Nancy and Kevin. I believe it was just before Thanksgiving when we met to come to some sort of an agreement on some things, and I do believe we made quite a bit of progress since then. Just to get you up to speed on what we've done. So one of the things that we've done is we've installed foam pads, which they call base traps. So we've installed those in all corners of our 10,000 square foot facility to help kind of, keep the base where it belongs inside the gym, and I think that's helped. We've also, during that time as well, I've given my cell phone number, my personal cell phone number to the Daigles. So Mrs. Daigle, she can, we've been texting back and forth in the morning. She's let me know when she hears it. And we've been making progress there as well. Also on their suggestion, we had 6 speakers inside of our facility. We've gone ahead and removed 2 of those. So we no longer have 6 speakers going at the same time. I always have money on my mind, sorry. So that's what we're doing. So those are the couple things we've done. I believe that the reduction of the 2 speakers has definitely helped and made a big difference. I know talking to Mrs. Daigle, she has noticed a difference. And so that's kind of where we're at currently.
Great, thank you, Robbie. I'll ask the Daigles and others to speak, but does anybody have questions for Robbie initially? Okay. So Kevin or Nancy, do you want to speak?
Yes, thank you very much. Again, thank you for your time. I know this is the third time, but every time that we have these conversations, I think we do move in the right direction. And this is a concern for my mother and I in the North Acton community. So I think it's time well spent for the board. Without adding context, I'm not sure if the board has had a chance to review the letter that was submitted, that I submitted on behalf of Vivian Marr.
I saw it. I don't know if everybody had a chance to view it, but you said you had a copy you could
I do.
provide. Do you mind giving it to Lisa, and she'll make sure it's added into the packet as well?
Absolutely. Would you mind if I just recited it?
Oh, yeah,
At least
no,
record it
sure.
and
Yep.
and
that
put on
sounds good.
record. Dear Acton Board of Selectmen, I am writing this letter with regard to the use special permit application for CrossFit Reach. I hear the noise of the bass coming from the gym throughout the day, especially in the early morning. It can be very scary to hear the bangs and booms. I am hard of hearing and use hearing aids during the day. I do not wear my hearing aids when I am sleeping, yet the noise has startled me awake on several occasions. The bass can be so loud that sometimes I think it's thunder. It has been going on for a long time and is a problem for our neighborhood. I have been living in the North Acton community for over 49 years, and the noise of the gym is an unnecessary burden that negatively affects my quality of life. Would you allow such an establishment in the center of town? I think not. If the owner has been running the gym this long without a permit, it should be proof enough that it should not be granted. I wish I could attend the town hall to show my support, however, vision and mobility issues unfortunately prevent my attendance in person. Instead, I am writing this letter to voice my opposition to the permit application. Respectfully submitted, Vivian Marr. And she is at 927 Main Street, which, looking at the gym from 929, that is to the left, so that is closer by a few feet tangentially to the property at 930 Main Street. So I can drop this off for?
Yeah, as long as you give it to
if
Lisa
already
before you
don't
leave,
have
she'll
it.
get it in our packet. Thank you.
So my main point here, and I understand that Robbie and the gym have a great community there. He is a positive influence on the neighborhood, not the neighborhood, I'm sorry, but the health of his clientele. However, the fact that the noise is so loud, I don't think that it's necessary to run a gym that has so much noise in it in order to have results. I think that atmosphere that he has said is material to his business and the operation of his business and their success is not what is getting the results that his clients are achieving. It is the actual lifting of the weights or the running or the cardio or whatever he chooses to do. So that's important. And when you equate the mental health of the people that are living in close proximity to this gym versus people being able to work out to loud music, it does not make sense. It's just, it's not fair to the citizen. This is something that likely will have to be disclosed to potential buyers of the property. It is my inheritance. I'm concerned about that. Eventually, I do not live in Acton currently, but I born and raised in Acton, graduate of Merriam School, and I would like to move back to this town when I'm able to afford it. So I also sent a proposal to Robbie yesterday that included it's a very objective and enforceable, which is the key word here, enforceable limitation or condition of his permit approval. Again, I'm not opposed to approving the permit. I think that is a great idea to have, Robbie continue to help these people in our community and other communities. The limitation set would be to, behind the scenes in the application, lower the volume by 20%. So that means that on the main interface, all of his employees who have access to the stereo system from their phones will be able to max out the volume without any is it far enough to the right? Is it too loud? Is it too quiet? That is a control that needs to be put in place in order to ensure that the music does not reach the community. In line with, or as a subcomponent of the proposal, we have offered an opportunity to incentivize Robbie to make infrastructure improvements to the facility itself to allow him to send a letter to the Board of Selectmen to increase the volume limitations on the devices that he is using. I think that will show investment in the community and his business, but also good faith to the neighbors that surround him. I do not want to make a spectacle of this, but I have brought the speaker that he utilizes. I think that if I were to show you here just how loud the speaker is, multiply it by 6 and put it in a room that is probably 6 times as big as this, you can imagine the noise within it, but then also how that noise and the acoustics of the building, much like an acoustic guitar, for example, blast the noise out into the neighborhood, and that is why it's a problem. This is something that I have done a lot of amateur research on, and it could be something as simple as the eaves of the roof not being tight, a simple fix, something that if it was analyzed or looked at by a professional to come in and actually do this for the property, that is something that the surrounding community would greatly appreciate. So again, as far as Robbie's points about what the improvements he has made in the past since our last meeting, I suggested almost all of those. However, I think that his implementation of them was slightly flawed. If you have a room that maybe is 10 by 10, you can use a foam base trap that is about a foot wide by however deep, and that's effective. However, this is a massive 10,000 foot warehouse, so there'd have to be larger base traps or something like that's more involved and actually done with purpose rather than just implemented for the sake of doing something to present tonight. So that is why I urge Robbie to just reconsider my proposal and buy into to the neighborhood and the community to make improvements to the building so that we can live in harmony. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll open it up to questions or comments generally from the public. If there's anybody here who wants to speak.
Sarah Fredericks, West Acton. I think the state law has specific requirements that noise can't be above a certain level, 7 a.m. to whatever time. And I'm curious as to if anybody has ever measured the decibels coming off the property, because there's pretty specific requirements. Noise pollution is now considered a health issue under state law. So I would urge that anything you do doesn't trump whatever rights they've got under state law to ensure that the sound is not too loud. And I certainly urge you guys to get a reading, because if it's above the state law, then if you haven't done anything to trump that, because I think that the towns can make things, I don't know if they can actually, I think they can make it tighter and better, safer for water or safer for residents, but I don't think you can just waive state law. So maybe this is all moot and take a look at the actual measurements. But I'm definitely in support of quiet, and I'd like to hear what this sounds like. I don't know, can we play it here? So that people can understand how loud it is. Anyway, thank you.
Other questions or comments from the audience? Yes, Jim.
Just a minor question. I think you're dealing with the important questions right now, but of course it's another special use permit and it's right near a bike path, so just wondering about the bike parking. Is there bike parking there? It seems like CrossFit members would love to have bicycle parking.
I'm trying to think in that complex. Robbie, do you know if there's any bike parking in there's multiple
There's no
things there.
specific bike parking, but you could literally put your bike anywhere, really. But I have a couple bikes in my gym, actually.
Thanks.
Yes, I don't think there's any, just as a note, they do, rent this. Other comments from members of the audience?
Can I just make a few more comments?
Sure, Robbie.
Just a couple things. So, in regards to, the early morning time. So one of the things I'm more than happy to do, willing to do is, between the hours of 5:30 and 7 is to keep that noise level down, in regards to, I don't think her name's Tara, with the state law, whatever, I believe it's around 7 a.m. I'm more than happy to do that. That's not a thing. I think after that, everybody's up and at 'em and working. So that's one thing. And then the other thing too, I think is, just from my end, is my biggest frustration is just trying to understand, what noise is being heard by the Daigles. That's been my biggest frustration, just because I haven't been able to, go into their house or experience what they're hearing. I think that's the biggest thing, because anytime we've tested it, with, a decibel meter or whatever, I know you guys have stopped by as well. You just can't, I just don't hear it, So I think that's my biggest frustration. And the other thing too is I know that, myself and Nancy have been texting back and forth. And on Saturday, she had texted me at, 6:10 in the morning saying that she was hearing the music for about 20 minutes or so. Our gym wasn't even open. We don't open until 7:30 in the morning. So I don't know. So that's what my frustration is just trying to understand, their side of things, because I just honestly don't hear it. I'm willing to work with it regardless, just to, be a good neighbor and make things, progress, and I can continue to serve the community and help people out as I've done the last 9 years. So I'd like to continue to do that for sure.
Thank you.
Cool.
Kevin, yes. I don't want to get into too much of a back and forth.
Right, this is quick.
But, yeah.
And Robbie can achieve all of those goals by just giving us the opportunity to immediately eliminate the noise as an issue and the concern of the community, and then work towards finding that way forward. I think that we need something that is objective and enforceable. In the past, we've had conversations about this. They haven't gone well. I've heard that the volume would come down. It goes down for a little bit, but then the next person comes in, they turn it all the way back up, and then we're back where we started. And that is not how my mother, who lives in that house by herself, would like to live her life. Who is Robbie to say that she needs to wake up at 7 a.m. every day? If you stay home sick and you're in your house all day, does that mean you have to suffer through the base all day? It's something that affects her every single day. And I realize this is an irritation for Robbie to come here and continue to have to support his special use permit, but this is something that we live with. So to us, it really means a lot to have this condition placed on it.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure, Peter.
Is it Matt?
Robbie or
Robbie.
Kevin?
No, the neighbor.
On the left, Kevin.
Yes,
I, for one, am in favor of resolving this one way or the other tonight. It's gone on long enough, but you keep talking about the North Acton community. I know your mother was here last time. She talked to us. You now have another letter from the next door neighbor. What are you referring to when you're talking about the community? How wide is the community? How many people? We've had probably 24 letters from people who go to CrossFit saying, give them the permit. So how big is the community you're talking about?
well, it's the North Acton Village. I mean, clearly, we're the only, my mother and Vivian Marr, in her household, are the only two that have voiced concern about this in opposition to it. However, according to the bylaw, there's no quantity of, or limit or minimum of number of people who have to be affected by this for it to require a resolution.
I don't know. People from planning are here. I think the language in the bylaws is detrimental to the neighborhood. Is that the language? Yeah.
I have
Okay.
it
Talks about
right here.
neighborhood. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Will not be detrimental or injurious to the neighborhood in which it is to take place. So
Okay.
that's two of us
we've
from the
heard from
neighborhood.
two. Okay. All right. I just.
Yes, sir. The
that's
two in
okay.
closest proximity.
Yeah. Thank you.
Katie?
Yes, Mr.
A
Vincent.
question for Kevin. Kevin, you had said lower the volume by 20%.
Yes, sir.
Then, could I ask Rob a question?
Sure.
On that? You have lowered the volume, I understand.
I have, yes.
Is it approximately 20%?
Yeah, it's about 80%, yeah. So I've instructed all my coaches who coach the 5:30, 6:30, 7:30 to keep it at 80%. Once we get around 7 o'clock, that's when we've been turning it back up. But yeah, it's been around 80% in the morning.
So I understand you have classes at 5:30, 6:30, and 7:30.
7:30, yeah, 9:30 noon time.
And are they classes through the day?
They are, yep. So we have 4 in the mornings, not 4 in the morning, but we have 4 in the morning, 5:30, 6:30, 7:30, 9:30. We have a noon time, and then we have a 5, 6, and 7.
Okay, so there's a big blocks during the morning and in the afternoon when there are not any classes.
Exactly, yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a great point. If Robbie has different instructors that usually teach the different classes, I would propose to concede a little bit of my original proposal to just require the morning instructors to have that restriction on their phone, as well as the late night or latest classes as well. And as I mentioned, I have the speaker here. I can definitely
Yeah, Kevin, if Robbie said he's lowered the volume by 20%, does that meet your concern?
It does not, because we're talking about a sliding scale on an iPhone. So when you slide it up, you're sort of guesstimating what 80% is. And if you go too far to the right when you're turning on the music in the morning, that could be, an alarm clock for the neighborhood, or for my mother and Ms. Marr. So that's why behind the scenes there's a feature that is a volume limiter, and that allows you to turn up the volume in the main interface to the maximum, yet behind the scenes it places a limit of 80%. And again, that is something to be a point of upward departure, as I said in my email, where if he's able to better insulate this old metal warehouse, it can go back up. We're not trying to close down the business. It's
He
a way
did put
forward.
$700 into foam padding throughout the old building, if I'm
I would say
correct.
that was ill-advised. He did not properly research the foam pads. He did not understand the science of sound and the physics of sound behind it. He did that in an attempt to show the council that he is trying to invest money in this and find a quick and easy solution. That was not something, that was a suggestion of mine, something for him to look into. And I actually said in our meeting that I did not want to be responsible for, having him go out and spending all this money on foam pads and then having it not be a solution. There's due diligence, fact-finding, research behind the scenes that we have not seen from Robbie. His solution is we'll turn down the music. That is not going to work. And it doesn't meet the requirements of the bylaw.
Janet, you have a question?
Okay, we're not getting anywhere here. I know, Peter, you want to resolve this tonight. My big issue with this discussion is you've got people who are not acoustical engineers, sound engineers, talking. I don't know where you're getting the 20% reduction is going to be satisfactory. I mean, did you pull that out of thin air? Because if it isn't, if Robbie says he's going to reduce it 20% and you say that's not the results are not satisfactory, then we've got a fundamental problem. So, I mean, I don't see how we're going to, it's he said, she said, all over again, and we're not going to resolve it by just talking about it. The other thing I would say is that talking about noise levels, if the state has noise levels, noise regulations that apply to all the lawn services in town, then they're going to get shut down because those guys get started at 7 o'clock next door, and they don't care if I'm sound asleep in bed and I have to sleep. I'm not. I'm awake at 5 or 4 o'clock in the morning, but they don't care. I mean,
Yes, ma'am.
that's going to shut down, So
Yeah.
I'm just saying that there are limits to the extent that we can regulate sound. And the resolution of this is really, I think, unfortunately, going to require, either we're going to have to do a site visit. A couple of you have been there. It would be I'd be interested to hear what your perspective is as people with sort of normal range hearing maybe. But, my concern is that, what, are we going to have to bring in an expert to kind of go and measure all the sounds from different places, including the sound that's coming from other than this CrossFit gym location. There are other things that generate noise in that area. And, you really need, if you want a scientific study, you've got to have a study that identifies at different times of day what the sounds are, because there are a lot of sounds generated. I mean, who knows? Maybe something's coming from NARA. We don't know. So.
Okay, so before we talk about Mr. Manager, you wanted to add something?
I can wait until the board has a chance to discuss further. I was just going to suggest a few options.
Okay. So I did visit. Robbie invited me. I went on a Saturday, something like that. Sunday? I don't know. Anyways, I went on a weekend. And we did turn the volume up the whole full way in the gym. And it's quite loud if you're inside the gym, for sure, and then walked out and walked around the building and down the street. I'll say personally, once we got to 27, I could hear the road a lot more, and frankly, I couldn't hear the sound of the gym at that point. I will note that the garage door wasn't open, which I think could, make a difference for sure. But personally, when the sound was up and the garage door was down, I heard more noise from Route 27 than I did from the gym. And I'll say this, sound is often a very tricky thing. When I worked for the state rep, one of the issues we dealt with at one point was a sound issue in the town of Harvard, Mass. And started receiving complaints from neighbors there, and we all initially thought that it was issues related to Fort Devens, often when they have practices and other things and are firing weapons off. If there's low cloud cover, that impacts the sound. And so for a long time, we were working with Devens related to that sound, and then it turned out that it was actually a manufacturing facility there. But it's very hard sometimes to identify where sounds are coming from, even if you live there. And I know the other uses aren't, don't necessarily seem like they would be what are creating sound, but, it's hard for me to feel like it was definitely from the CrossFit. And again, I think that when the door is open, there's likely a large difference. I completely understand that. Again, also, it could have just been, I think it was a sunny day, when it's cloudy, sound travels more, things like that. But the sound was up. I saw Robbie turn it on his phone up all the way before we and like I said, it was quite loud when I was in there, so I knew it was loud before we walked around. So that was my experience. John?
I had an early start to the day today, and I went over to CrossFit at 5:50 this morning, and I didn't go in initially. I stayed outside for about 40 minutes to about 6:30, and I had no noise outside. Then I walked around to your main door, knocked, went in, introduced myself to your instructor, Julia, and asked her if she explained that, the classes are for an hour. Music is not played for the full hour. There's a quiet period, then there's a build-up with music. And I said, well, I understand you've turned the music down. Could you put it on at that level? And she did, and, it was music in there. And I, walked outside, shut the door, and I couldn't hear, anything in the parking lot there. And then I went back in and I said, could you put it up to full blast? I did leave the door open. When you left the door open, you could hear it in the parking lot. I didn't get the sense that it was going out to Route 27 and beyond. When I shut the door, there was no noise out there. Frankly, when I was between that 5:50 to 6:30 period, the noise that I would hear was from Route 27, particularly when you had a slew of 3, 4, or 5 cars, going by at that hour. I could see the problem, when the doors, particularly the garage, would be a garage door, that large door, if that were open in hot weather, and you had the music going, that could go out a ways. I don't know if it would necessarily, go up to 27, because the difference, the length is more than one football field from CrossFit to the Daigle residence. I was a little, Julia did mention to me, and it was in Robbie's email later today, that your mom called or texted Rob on Saturday about 6:15 and saying, the music's too loud, I'm hearing it. And Julia said to me, she was the person who opened that day, and she didn't open till 7 o'clock. So is there something more going on here that we're aware of?
Yeah, just to address that point, my mom sent me the text of the Nest Cam showing the inside of the building. There's no indication that the speakers were off, and you also do not have to be inside the building to operate the stereo system. And I know that we were coming here in preparation for tonight. I gave Robbie my mother's phone number in good faith so that they could communicate, not to allege a gotcha moment. Perhaps, I'm not saying that that's what happened, but it was just a good faith effort to get the communication going back and forth.
But if I understand it right, when your mother complained at 6:13 on Monday via text, CrossFit wasn't open.
Saturday.
It was open at 7. It didn't open until 7, so no one was in there, nothing was on apparently.
There was no way to indicate or tell us that nothing was on. It's possible that the system could have been operated from the outside of the building. That's the nature of the system.
I'd like to hear Robbie
it's wireless.
on that one, if we may.
Yeah, so we use a Nest security cam, so I could provide actual live stream footage, because Nest holds the footage for 7 days, and it has audio on it, and there's no sound. It has audio, but there was no sound playing.
So you would say it was off?
It was off, yeah.
And you're convinced of that?
100%.
Okay, so at this point, Mr. Manager, do you want to, you said you had some potential suggestions. Why don't we hear those and talk about those, and I'll take one more public comment.
Okay. Well, this is clearly an issue that's been discussed at multiple meetings, and I think a lot of work has been put in by the Daigles to help come up with ideas, and by the property or the business owner to try to be responsive to those ideas. So I think at this point the board has 3 options. I think you can approve as written, you can deny as written, or you can approve with conditions. And if you were to take the 3rd option, we could potentially suggest a few conditions if that's what you're interested in doing.
Why don't you suggest conditions, because I think it's worthwhile to understand what those are for us to talk about, if that would.
Yeah, so, and I haven't had a chance to fully discuss this with the 2 parties that we've been talking about. I briefly mentioned it, but not really an in-depth conversation. But generally, I think that if the board was considering approving with conditions, one condition that you could consider attaching is that the applicant shall make all efforts to reduce the volume/base level daily between the hours of 5:30 a.m. and 7 a.m. and when the garage door facing Main Street is open during class sessions. And that's, I mean, let's start there.
Okay. Reactions, thoughts, comments from others?
I'm okay with conditions. I think that the owner has agreed to conditions. We could certainly write in the conditions that he'd agreed to. That sounds similar to what they're already doing, I think. But I'm okay with that. None of us are familiar with the science or physics of sound either. There is an agency in the state that is. Mass DEP has an air pollution regulation that defines particularly the level of noise that violates the air pollution regs, and they say on their website, when Mass DEP responds to a complaint about an existing source of noise, it focuses on protecting affected people at their residences and other buildings that are occupied by sensitive receptors from nuisances and the public health effects of the noise. So, to me, I am not convinced that the complaint by the resident draws me to the conclusion that granting this special permit would be detrimental to the neighborhood. So I'm in favor of granting the special permit, and if the resident wants to deal with the noise issue, the proper authorities to deal with it are the Mass Department of Environmental Protection.
Other reactions, Janet?
I'm fine with approving with conditions.
Okay.
Yeah, my concern, of course, is that again, it's good faith effort, and if the good faith effort by the proprietor is not sufficient, then, the complaint will continue. So, but, I think, at that point, as Peter suggests, maybe the resident's option is to go to the state and complain and get some professionals involved in evaluating the situation. So,
Joan, you're okay.
Yeah, I would I would approve the permit with conditions. Would offer a motion containing the conditions if you'd like.
Let me just take two more basic public comments, and then I will look for a motion. Yes, Charlie.
Charlie Aronson, South Acton. It bothers me a little bit that we haven't learned from history. A few years ago, there was a similar noise pollution issue in North Acton that was produced by essentially a sawmill that was manufacturing firewood. And the neighbors complained at that time, and the resolution involved getting professionals in to measure the sound levels. You talk about a 20% reduction or some other kind of reduction, but you don't know what you're reducing it from. I think that you need some objective data and figure out whether there is a violation of any rules, and then people can negotiate what to do from that. But to go off without any data, I mean, there are a lot of, I think this and I think that, I think that's a mistake. And I think we can learn, I don't remember all of the details, and I would hate to dredge them up out of my memory, which is probably not as good as it should be. But I think that's all documented, and that you can learn from that experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Hold on, I'm just going to take all the public comment first. Yes.
Hi, Linda Vieira, Village of Nagog Woods, and I am not a sound engineer, but I am a musician, and there is a huge difference in the amount of bass that affects a person. I teach in a community music school, and it's so much different if there's a piano playing underneath me as opposed to a bass or something that's loud rock music. So I would tend to want the owner of CrossFit to be more understanding about the effects of loud bass sounds as opposed to just some other kind of music, and that it could vary during the day. And I would also say that even though there's only 2 neighbors involved, I would hope that the board would take into consideration the well-being and the happiness of these residents as if it was 20 residents or 200 residents. I don't care how many residents this is. It's 2 residents that are having major issues, and it seems like this has been brought to the board several times, so this is my first time exposing to that, but I would hope that the business owner would be more amenable to doing more to alleviate the problem and not have to take it to the state level. Thank you.
Okay. Now I'm going to bring it back to the board.
No, I was just going to say, my memory, Charlie brings up the prior noise pollution issue we had in North Acton. My memory was it was either the company or the residents who, there was a large group, paid a sound engineer to come out and take the measurements. I don't think the town paid for it. So anyway, that's my memory. I could be wrong about that.
No, I think you're right. Okay, John, you wanted to make a motion? At this point, I'm going to have the board members make a motion and discuss. Can you turn on your microphone?
Almost. That the board approve the special use permit with the condition that Mr. Blanchard make all best efforts to reduce the volume, is that /base, including reducing speaker usage from 6 speakers to 4 speakers between the hours of 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. and when the garage doors open.
Okay, John has made a motion. Joan has seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so we will, the planning department at this point will write that up and we will sign that. And thank you very much to everybody for coming tonight. Okay, so the next issue, we are now down to Selectmen's business. The next issue is the Dog Park Committee presentation. So the Dog Park Committee would like to come up.
How do I click the...
So we're going to get at that.
You want to teach me? Forward and back. Thank you, John.
base.
Oops. All set? I'm Claire Siska. I'm the chair of the Dog Park Committee, and I just very quickly want to acknowledge Kathy Fochman, the Director of Recreation, and Joan Gardner, who has been our liaison to the Board of Selectmen, who have been invaluable resources in the work that we've done in the last 11 months, and also Tom Gillespie, Karen Martin, Mike Perry, and Fred Kinch, who are our committee members who have worked really hard in the last year. Just a little bit of data. I won't read this to you. The point I wanted to make here is that clearly people are recognizing the value of dog parks. There are over 770 dog parks in existence in the United States, and they are increasing rapidly. So somebody thinks it's a good idea. Sorry for my... I just wanted to show you a couple pictures from some dog parks. For those who might think that a dog park is just a smelly, sort of unsanitary, unkempt, loud place, dog parks are actually really attractive landscaped spaces. They tend to have green space and trees. They're very happy places with people playing with their dogs and relaxing and making connections with one another. People who are dog owners tend to police one another. They don't allow people to leave dog poop lying around. And it's in this very busy world, people tend to slow down and sit and relax and play. And so these are, a dog park can really be a great amenity for a town such as Acton. And I also just throw in that when you hang out with a dog, your endorphin levels go up, so it improves your mood. So since we're not going to have any pot shops in Acton, it might be nice to have a dog park instead. So why are we here today? In August of 2017, the Dog Park Committee was formally formed in response to community requests. We met with the Board of Selectmen in January of 2018, and you validated our justification for a park, and your directive to us was to identify the funding and identify a suitable location from municipal lands that might be available to us. So we'll start with the funding, which is actually the easy part. How much will it cost? We have consulted with two design firms that have designed dog parks. They're Massachusetts firms, and they estimate the design in around the $25,000 amount, and that I'll talk to you about funding later, but we know that we can get that covered. Construction of a 2 to 3 acre park is typically in the $250,000 range, and again, we will talk about the funding in a minute. Maintenance, we've talked to a number of dog park committees in Massachusetts and local towns, or nearby towns. They have estimated that they spend approximately $4,000 annually. That includes insurance, trash pickup, surface maintenance. It also includes poop bags and the like. So that's the kind of money that we're going to be looking for. And so where are we going to get it? Okay, so we're fortunate in Massachusetts. There is a foundation called the Stanton Foundation, and one of the things that they do a lot with canine welfare. They do fund 100% of design funds, about $25,000. There is an anticipated construction grant, which covers 90% of construction, up to $225,000. My understanding, and I know Matt Selby has done some research on this, is that the Stanton funds are actually limitless and non-competitive. So as long as we meet the requirements of the grant, we can pretty much count on getting the money. The stickler is that they do require the town to provide the land, and the town, and we can define the town a lot of different ways, but we have to come up with a 10% match of the construction costs. So that would be approximately $25,000. We cannot apply for the design or the construction grant until we make that $10,000 match, or sorry, $25,000 match, the 10%. We had, as you know, we came to the board and we approached you for CPA funds, and since we weren't far enough down the road, we were passed over for CPA funds for this year. We are planning, anticipating to apply in fall of 2019. And if all went well, we would get funds from CPA in 2020, but that's a long way from now. If we waited for that CPA funding, which is not guaranteed, we wouldn't be able to even start the process until the middle of 2020. So we're looking at CPA funds to better use for enhancement funding, such as additional benches or any other improvements that we deem necessary. Somebody mentioned an aerobic dog poop processor or something. There's lots of different things that we can do. So we have started thinking, we'll be talking in January about what avenues we can do to raise those funds. So that's really, getting that $25,000 is going to be the point at which we can start the process. We could do crowdsourcing, we can, we can go to veterinarians, we can go to trainers, we could reach out to all of the dog owners, of which there are about 1,600. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. But so that's kind of our go forward point, is when we raise the $25,000. And then we did talk about how are we going to maintain the park moving forward so that it doesn't get just built and forgot about. We did want to plan for that. Some ideas that have come up are annual memberships. It's very common for dog parks to form friends of groups, and people pay $25 just because they feel like it's a good idea, and you can get veterinarians or other canine-friendly groups to contribute or become annual members. Another possible idea is a fob access, where you would actually pay to be able to use the park. That's debatable. I think, not representing the committee, but me personally, I feel like it kind of defeats the purpose of having an open park that people could come and enjoy and get familiar with dogs and not have to be a member. Another idea that we ran by the town manager, and he said he would do some research for us, would be whether we could increase the dog license fees. And since there are about 2,000 dogs in Acton right now, if we were able to increase the annual license fee for $2 per license at 2,000 dogs, that would be the $4,000 that we need on an annual basis to maintain the park. And we would assume that some of that money would go, and we would ask the town to provide basic maintenance like they do with other parks, trash pickup, plowing, and that we could have a shed at the park where members could store supplies so that they could go in and keep the park clean themselves. So that's where we're at with money. Location. This is the process that the committee followed. Excuse me. Get to my this is the process that we followed to come up with a location. And before I go down the process, I do want to acknowledge that I know there have been concerns expressed about our process and feedback that we should have reached out more formally to the abutters. I do apologize if we didn't do, a perfect process. We are a committee. Some of us have never worked in town government before. We did the best that we could. But also, since we had only been directed by the Board of Selectmen to come to you with our findings and our recommendations, we did not, and so nothing's written in stone. We were just coming to you for advice and to tell you how much we've gotten, where we've gotten so far. We did not feel it was appropriate for us to do any formal reach out or hearings to any neighborhoods at that point until we had reported back to you. So, this was our process. We looked at other dog parks. We did research on what our site criteria should be, and I'll just point those out to you in a minute. We evaluated 13 municipal properties that were brought to our attention by the Land Use Department as municipal land that should be available for potential use. We took a tour with Tom Tidman and Kathy Fochman. We also went out with Selby and looked at the Walker property. We then compared that site criteria to the sites that we were looking at. We eliminated a number of them, 7 of them to be exact. We reduced the list to 6 sites that best matched our criteria. We then went out to the Commission on Disabilities, the Open Space Committee, the Land Stewardship Committee. We went to Recreation. We talked to the Conservation Commission. We reached out to Acton 2020 and also to Mary Ann Ashton from the Morrison Farm Committee to get their feedback about those spaces and whether they would be appropriate. And that helped us to further narrow down our choices. We then developed a survey. We went out to Oktoberfest and to Acton Boxborough Farmers Market, asked for feedback from the public, and we published that site survey via the Nextdoor app, veterinarians, pet stores, Facebook, Action Unlimited, the e-blast, the Municipal Quarterly, and we were at special town meeting handing out flyers as well. These were the location site considerations that we looked at. We looked at size. Ideally, we would get 2 to 3 acres, including our parking area. That's a dream. We may not be able to accomplish that, but that we felt would be a good size. We looked at the terrain, whether or not it was permeable soil, whether it was relatively flat, what kind of existing vegetation was on that, whether we would have to take down vegetation, what that would cost, drainage, what kind of impact on the ecosystem, on wildlife, on trees, plants, water. We do need a potable water source. That's part of what's required by Stanton, but also for the dogs and the users of the park, we're going to need not necessarily water for them to swim in, but certainly water for them to refresh themselves and water for us to be able to clean the park. And the location, and a lot of factors went into that, whether there was pedestrian or vehicle access, how close was it to residential, whether other people were in conflict that also wanted to use that location, how central was it, how many people would be able to get there. Franny Osmond asked us to hopefully make sure that pedestrians could get there and there might be sidewalks, as well as having to drive there, whether there are existing shade elements or the potential to put up structures for that, and whether there's space for parking. So those are all the things we looked at. This is the data from the citizen survey. As you can see, it wasn't real helpful. Out of 180 responses, there was pretty much equal support for 5 out of 6 sites. There was no clear winner. However, the location in the rear behind the Brookside shops was clearly in last place, according to the survey. And those sites, I'm sorry I didn't mention them, Quarry Road, a space across from Nara Park, Ice House Pond, which is a little section of near Ice House Pond on the Morrison Farm property, the Arlington Street area, that large treed area that was originally bought for a school and then considered for the senior center. There's the School Street property that is currently the unofficial dog park of Acton behind the fire station, the 348, 362 Main Street Walker property, and the Great Road, which is the Brookside shops. Those were the sites that we narrowed down to. And given everything that we learned from people, this is the kind of things that the citizens wanted: shade, shelter, away from homes because of the noise, convenient access, parking for enough cars, generous space for the dogs, some way to keep the dogs away from traffic, potable water, a way to make it ADA accessibility, and trail access would be nice, but it's not required, it's just wants. A big concern that came up early on from all of the natural resources people was whether or not we would have to clear trees. There's a strong desire to not have to take down mature trees. And also from the committee's perspective, tree clearing would add a substantial cost to us. People are obviously going to be concerned about noise and barking, safety, getting to and from, what are the environmental impacts, and what are the use conflicts. So similar to what the committee came up with, that was the survey feedback that we got from citizens. So we're narrowed down to, I wish I could, I would have loved to come to you and said, here's a slam dunk property. This is what we want, this is, it's fine, everybody's going to say yes to it, but unfortunately, that's not where we're at. Excuse me, got to flip. So both of these properties, the Walker property at Main Street, offer us some challenges. The Walker property is good because it has very few homes nearby. It's very central. You could come off Route 2 and see the dog park and see people playing, so I think it would be a nice amenity and a nice view for people that are coming into Acton. It does have some potential existing parking. Town water is easy to get to. The land is cleared. Nobody has any environmental concerns about it, given what's happened with it recently. The terrain is pretty appropriate. We'd have to do some leveling of the ground, and it's an underdeveloped parcel. But as you all know, we don't know if we can, we know that in fact that we are not considered a viable contender for the use of the entire Main Street property. But there is some potential. One of the Acton Housing Authority proposal does use that space that I showed you, that those two parcels are open space according to their proposal. Yes, no, you're shaking your head, Katie.
Which,
The walker, here's my little,
are you showing all of the Walker? Oh, I see.
No,
You're on
I'm just
one
showing-
side.
I'm just showing the
Okay.
two
Yeah, yeah,
parcels.
one side of the, just so people
Yes.
understand, not the full Walker parcel.
yes, exactly.
That's-
Those are the two parcels that I believe in the Acton Housing Authority proposal, the lower parcel
Are open.
would be used for septic, and the upper is an open space.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to be clear for people. That's
Sure.
Isaac Davis Way in there, and
Yes.
it's the stuff closer to Route 2, not the other half of the
Yes,
Walker.
exactly. Of course, we don't know that AHA is going to get that proposal, but they have expressed an openness to work with us to potentially put a dog park there, and we are meeting with Kelly Cronin, who's the chair of Acton Housing, on Wednesday night of this week to talk with her more fully about that. So obviously, if we were going to share use, there would be some, probably some legal and financial and coordination plans that we would have to do. Some people may not want to bring their dog to a park that's on a main street. And we would just have to deal with traffic safety, turning in, turning out. Those are things that we would have to address, and certainly too early in the process to do that. Then the Great Hill Fields. You can't see the green on here, but this just shows the lower section of Great Hill behind the fire station. And again, I can't see, my little shiny thing isn't working. There is little, huh? What's that? Oh, did I do? I'm still not. Battery's not working. So there is Little Great Hill, but we haven't really talked about that with any of the neighbors. I don't want to do any sort of a bait and switch. There is some wetland and a little bit of a rise that we would have to do if we wanted to get there. Then there's the soccer fields over at Great Hill and the pond. We don't know exactly how much we would use of Great Hill. Again, it was a little too early in the process to do that. We did work with engineering to come up with some potential designs, but one of the challenges with Great Hill is that, there are a lot of people that supported it. There are also a lot of people who feel like it's not broke, don't fix it. And those people who bring their dogs there don't want it fenced in. It wasn't our intention when we started this process to supplant anything that already exists or to take away. We wanted to come up with something for the people who can't use a non-fenced dog park. So that's a challenge for Great Hill. So where do we go from here? And our hope is that in the winter of 2018, spring of 2019, we would make a final site selection. There are some dependencies there. Clearly, on the 15th of January, the Main Street Committee is supposed to be making their decision. We would wait to hear about that and see what our discussions are. Well, she's shaking her head, but I was told there's going to be a meeting on the 15th. And then I guess it's got to go to town meeting, whatever. So we don't even know if Walker is a potential for us. And the same thing, Great Hill is another possibility. If those two fall through, then we're kind of back to the drawing board. We've been told, it's suggested to, see if there's other properties that we could dig up and look at. But let's say, hopefully we meet our goal of making a final site selection from those two properties. We would then go into some preliminary design and we would do whatever we could to make that $25,000 match. And then once we did that, we would start applying for our grants, select a designer, do additional fundraising. Also not on the slide is also we would make, at that point there would be a Friends of committee formed at some point in that process who would eventually take over management of the park. And then we were hoping that we would break ground in 2019 by this time. I don't know if that's optimistic. So what we are looking for from the Board of Selectmen is feedback on everything we've done, getting some information from you, getting some direction, any questions, any preferences, guidance on final site selection. Just really wanted to get your feedback. I also, we delivered a number of supporting materials to you in your packet, how a dog park correlates with the Acton 2020 plan, how it correlates with the Walker property proposal, how it correlates with open space. We gave you some sample dog park designs, information about the Stanton Foundation, and some research and resources on the dog park. And I just want to say from Acton's dog lovers and dogs, thank you very much for your time.
Great, thank you very much, Claire. Do you mind just staying up there? Just while I will initially open it up to questions or comments from members of the board. Jan.
Just quickly, Claire, this is, I'm really astonished at the amount of work that you've put in. I found the material all very interesting because I really don't know anything about dog parks, so I actually was one of the people who went through the little bibliography and tried to anyway, but at some point I ran out of time. Yeah, I agree with you. You wish you could come here with a slam dunk. There are, especially with the Main Street property, I see real challenges with that, and I think, unfortunately, or fortunately, because so many dog owners already are using Great Hill unofficially as a dog park, I frankly think that that's probably a more appealing site, in part because it's, it has parking. My thought, of course, in making it a dog park site is that maybe there would be more control over the dog owners whose dogs never leave poop behind the fire station, but it was abundant when some of us went on a site walk for Four Piper Lane. It was, oh, watch out, and it's just, that's, because I'm always the one who steps in it, it's just, and it's one of those things where everybody's looking at the bottom of their shoes, and it's not, if you have a dog park and you have dog owners who are going to be responsible for cleaning up, then presumably that would be less of an issue. I realize people want to have their dogs running free and all that, but dogs run free and they leave little things here and there that some people may go off trail and they'll discover that, the dogs have been there before them. I think it is kind of a disgusting problem for dog owners and non-dog owners. It sort of spoils things to have to deal with that, but if people aren't going to be responsible at Great Hill, maybe having a dog park there is a good, is something to consider. So I just wanted to thank you for all of the work. I know that there's going to be more work yet to be done because of the sites and the uncertainty, but you've just really you've made a big dent in the efforts. And it's nice to know that there's a Stanton Foundation that, I'll have to go read about them and find out why. They must be a family of dog lovers or something, and just, hey, no amount of money is too much, right, for a good cause. So thank you.
Thank you.
Peter, questions?
Just quickly, I'm just wondering why you didn't put Great Hill on your survey. It's not one of the 6 properties.
It is.
It's just listed as School Street.
It's listed as School Street.
School Street.
Yeah,
It kind of cut it off. I also didn't, I sort of skipped over some of the challenges with Great Hill. We do need to consider how we would deal with parking and bringing town water a long distance from the road. We also have to take a good look at the wetlands buffer and where we can work and where we can't. So apologize for skipping that.
Yeah, there may be issues with the soccer folks there also. I don't know if you have enough room to squeeze in a dog park. And
apparently, the recreation folks are much more softer on their objection because the soccer fields don't often get used because it tends to be wet.
Okay.
But I can't speak for them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I would lean toward Great Hill also, but I think we need a lot more information. Just one point, I think we're kind of trying to stay away from walker terminology. That kind of left a bad tape. No, that's fine.
I don't even know where that came from.
I don't know if the community uses it, but we're just referring to it as Main Street.
348, 360.
Okay.
I think people are familiar with where that is now, so.
Okay.
We never came up with a good...
Where did Walker come from?
He was the owner of the property before the town purchased it.
Thank you.
Through litigation with him, which is why we tend not to use it. Joe, questions or comments?
No, I observed the dog park committee.
Can you just use your microphone?
I commend the dog park committee for all the effort they've put in to produce this and be where they are at this moment. They've all worked hard and put in a lot of thought and time.
Thank you, John.
John?
Yeah, I would echo strongly those sentiments. I didn't realize how many dogs there are in Acton, and I'm learning how many are in our neighborhood. We live on Minuteman Ridge, where this 83 homes, which the property was built in 1965, and the houses were always known by the name of the first owner. Now they're known by the name of the dog that lives in the house. With, on the 548 Main Street property.
348, yeah.
I understand the Acton Housing Authority and the other developer, the fellow from Riverwalk in Concord, are both open to having dog parks if...
So I forget what it is, but the Riverwalk people,
Now communities.
Now Communities.
Their proposal included a much smaller area that I don't think would meet the needs or the kind of requirements of the dog park committee.
Yeah, it would not.
And it wasn't, neither of these are set in stone to be used for a dog park, but the open space that they showed, I think would be too small for a dog park.
it would be those, that lowermost property, only about half of that, because of the buffer zone for Route 2, is actually really available, so it becomes maybe like a half an acre. Those dog parks tend to be, they're built by developers to kind of serve the needs of that particular housing community.
How much area would you need for a dog park to do it right?
I would say, we could probably get away with 1.5 acres, but that would be the minimum, and then parking would have to be outside of that.
And then it would be fenced in?
Yes.
So an acre and a half?
Very minimum, yeah. We would,
1.5 acres would be
yes,
the minimum, okay.
of space that is actually allotted for the dogs.
And is there room on Great Hill for that with the soccer fields and?
With the soccer fields, I can't say, we don't have a good measurement on Great Hill because the GIS coordinates include all of Great Hill. So I actually was wondering if anybody had one of those great big tape measures. I could go over and walk it and try and get some measurements over there. Compared to Walker, I would...
Are you going to do that?
I have a 200-foot in my car.
Oh, I'll borrow it.
Do it tonight.
Just visually, compared to Walker, it's bigger than Walker, but there's also the meadow. I don't know if we would want to touch the meadow, but I think, what do you guys think? Great Hill is probably bigger.
But that includes a soccer field.
How would you address, what are the thoughts on addressing additional parking?
I don't have a good map here. So I walked it with Bettina the other day without my little laser. It's hard. Can I go up to the... No, I can't because I have to talk to the microphone. There's this kind of idea, I don't know if you can envision when you pull into that driveway there. There's a sidewalk on the right, and there's a buffer for the sidewalk. My understanding is that buffer has to remain because of the big parking area. They have to have a place to put the snow. To the right of that, there is a treed area that belongs, but it's in the 100-foot buffer zone. Bettina thought that, Bettina, who works for Natural Resources, she thought that Tom would work with us on coming up with some parking, but my original idea is if we could get just like 10 feet, there's this, sorry, I'm so bad because I wish I could draw. There's like this clump of trees where there's a trash can at the end of the driveway, and if we could like make a loop going in to a parking area and then a loop going out, we might, if at the very base of Great Hill, that perhaps like when you first go in, that perhaps we could get some parking there. The soccer fields would clearly be impacted. So it's probably be the case. I don't think we can do soccer fields and a dog park there. It's not going to fit. It would have to be one or the other, is my impression.
Okay, that's good to know.
Okay. Excuse me? And the commuters do not want us to touch the parking that's already there.
Yeah, as a commuter, I can totally see that.
There are 6 spaces in that commuter lot that are designated for the playground, even though there's not a playground anymore, and they get used up.
Where this is the South Acton Fire Station?
Yeah, right abutting up to the trees.
Gotta leave those alone.
Yeah, you gotta, we're really gonna need space for 20 cars, so we would have to go into Great Hill, I think.
But it's not big enough, Great Hill's not big enough for a dog park and the soccer.
And soccer fields. I would not think so. Okay. Unless we had a small one that was up by the meadow, but that's actually, from a practical matter, we'd have to get water all the way up there, and then people would probably not want us to touch the meadow anyhow. I just don't think it's going to, and you want the parking right, you want to go from the parking right into the park. Some dogs are handicapped, some people are handicapped. You don't want to force them to go all the way up the hill.
Okay.
So it's an issue.
Well, thank you for, all of you, for, lots of effort and very good work.
Okay.
And let's all stick with it and push ahead.
Okay. All right.
So yeah, I'll just start by saying, echoing the thanks. The committee has done a lot of work as evidenced by your presentation and all of the materials you've shared with us so far and prior to this meeting. Yeah, certainly Great Hill, there's that parking. I mean, lately, I have to get there at 7. Well, it boggles my mind. I got there late today and there was plenty of parking, but and forgot my phone, had to go back and come back. There's still parking. So, but if I get there some days at 7:10, it's all full. So it's certainly, I think you would meet significant resistance if you tried to cut into that
Take any of that parking,
yeah,
right, yes.
exactly. So I think if you're going to look at Great Hill, you'll have to seriously, you'll need to show how you're handling the parking so that the commuters, I think, are clear that you're not impacting that, or I think you'll automatically get resistance there. Certainly, there's obviously the folks that don't want to see it change, that might currently use it as is. And I think you're going to also have to start thinking about and addressing people's fears in town that if you have a dog park, that it could lead to leash requirements in other areas in town. And so I think it would be worthwhile to maybe look at what has happened in other towns and if that has happened or not, because that's a concern I've heard from some people is, well, if you have a dog park, does that mean you're now going to require, right now we only require it in NARA, but are you going to require it on all the conservation lands? And, it's something that I have heard the open space side, there are environmental impacts of dogs relieving themselves in the conservation land. So an area that I think I haven't heard a lot about yet, but that you'll probably want to address when it's if and when it's time to sort of go out and sell a specific thing. So the updates on the Walker, as you noted, the Walker Committee, the 364 Main Street Committee, we'll call it the Main Street Committee.
Okay.
We'll be in early January having a public forum where we're bringing back 3 proposals, one that's sort of a keep it as it is proposal, one that is the Acton Housing Authority a proposal, and one that's Now Communities, which built the Concord River Walk. And again, as noted, the Concord River Walk did provide some open space, but probably not enough for this dog park, and the Acton Housing Authority, I think, could fit that dog park. The timeline of these, it's definitely, I really love your enthusiasm and desire to hopefully be breaking ground this time next year. I hesitate. I don't want you to set your hearts on that and be disappointed, because I think the timeline of some of these, could impact. And Walker's Main Street Committee still then has to meet, and then if we make a recommendation on the 15th, we've got to bring it back to the board, and then we'd be bringing an issue or a proposal to town meeting, and then putting out an RFP, and then seeing where that goes. So it's a process. Similarly, I think a question for the Board of Selectmen at some point is going to be, how we make a decision once the dog park committee makes a recommendation on, if you make a recommendation on a specific site, how the Board of Selectmen approves that, if the board would want to approve that use as a board, or if we take that to a town meeting.
And so we've been asked that a lot. What is the process? And I don't know the answer to that.
Right, I'm like I mentioned earlier in the meeting, I will make my official announcement later, but I will not be on the board next year. So it'll probably be a future board to decide that fully. But with an issue this large, I think it would probably make sense to bring it to a town meeting, because I do think it's a change. but that will be up to a board to decide. And I think for you now, thinking about next steps is if you are kind of narrowed down on these, if you end up narrowing on these two and that's what you want to focus on, I would say, fleshing out all of the details of those. And this is sort of how the Main Street Committee did it, where we, narrowed, after a public forum, narrowed down to a few ideas, got more information on those, ended up doing an RFP, and are now coming back with more detailed kind of proposals. So I think that if you kind of, next steps get into, so Great Hill, where would the parking be? What, would the water look like? A mock-up of where the fencing would be, would it impact the meadow, where's the wetlands, that kind of thing, and similar on the Main Street parcel, if those are the two. And then I would say, I'd recommend you then have a public forum, because I think trying to get this out there as much as possible, so you're getting as much feedback from people, is gonna be important. You don't want to get so far down the path that then you've, committed to a space, and done a lot of work on that, and then are at the point where you're either bringing it to the Board of Selectmen for a vote or to a town meeting for a vote, and then are hearing all of the concerns. So I think having a public forum, it's a lot harder when you have that many too many, because as you see, you end up with a split vote pretty much among 6, which, as you said, wasn't super helpful for you. But so using your best judgment out of that and the other factors that you're considering, that I think would probably be a good next step before you bring it back to the board with your full recommendation. I just had a couple questions. By potable water, do you mean potable for dogs or for humans? Both, okay. And is that just because humans, you want access, like a bubbler for humans, or
Well, we need to be able to, we need to be able to give the dogs water. In Maynard, they just bring in their water in jugs. But Maynard is not a Stanton-funded park.
Okay.
The Stanton Foundation does require us to have potable water. I think we'd have to double check. It is for humans and dogs, I think.
Dogs. Okay, yeah, because the lake at Great Hill wouldn't, I assume dogs.
Exactly right. I know.
The humans aren't going to. Okay, interesting. Okay. And then when you are at the point where you have the money raised and a site approved, and you're at that point, what's the timeline for doing design? How long does that typically take?
Can I ask Tom to respond to that, because he's done that research?
Do you mind, Tom, just either having Claire repeat, or come up just for the TV audience?
Sure. So as Claire mentioned, we did talk to 2 design firms that have already done dog parks. They can turn it around fairly quickly. I don't think it's, anywhere near a year sort of process. It's a handful of months. They would meet with us, other town boards, et cetera. So I think we can turn the design around fairly quickly. These firms have worked and are familiar with Stanton requirements, et cetera. So I don't think that would be too lengthy.
Okay, that's interesting. And then the dog license, I thought that was an interesting idea for the ongoing maintenance. How much is a dog license per year right now?
Is it 10 or 15? I know there's an additional 5 if your dog is not neutered or spayed. So I don't know if it's 10 plus 5 for 15 or 15 plus 5 for 20.
Okay, but 15, 20?
It's 15 and 20.
Okay. 15, 20. So $2, percentage-wise is a big increase, but also it's a nominal amount. It's not a huge amount of money for most people. So I thought that was a creative idea. The fob, like you said, would have a lot of concerns about it. I think if the town is supporting this, and it's a town provided amenity, I don't love the idea of charging, and excluding some people unless there was a way that when you got your dog license, you could get a fob, for free, and then you could sell it to people from out of town or something like that. Interestingly, on the train ride home today, I was initially annoyed at the people talking next to me, two younger women, and because I was trying to read, but then realized that they were talking about dog parks, and I was like, oh, I will listen to this. And they were commenting on the dog, they were getting off in Waltham, so I assume lived nearby, and were commenting on the dog parks that they'd like to go to, and were saying that Chelmsford, was a good one, because it was a larger area, and even driving out that far, they thought that was worthwhile for that size. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and rang true with all of the research and everything that you
If I can actually comment on that, people could optionally put their town when they did the survey, and you'd be surprised at the number of people that were from Bolton,
Right.
Littleton,
Right.
West Concord.
Yeah, no, I imagine you would get a wide mix, and particularly depending on where it is in town, if it's right off of Route 2.
Yeah.
One of the questions I had on maintenance that I think will be important in going along in this next phase as well is talking to town staff to make sure, there's the assumption that town staff would be able to provide some of the basic trash removal and other maintenance, but, sometimes we always assume that when we're adding new things, and then we get to the tipping point of, well, now we need to add more, maintenance workers, because otherwise we're just adding on to their work.
Sure.
I don't think any of our staff are really sitting around waiting for more,
Right.
so.
That's a good point.
Okay, I think those were all of my questions. And again, just my thoughts at least on where you should go for next steps, but I'll ask the board for consensus or other ideas on that after I take public comment. So
Okay,
at this
thank
time,
you.
I will open it to public comment, and thank you
Very
all
helpful,
again.
thank you.
I'm Graham Nolan, 29 Estabrook Road, where I've lived for 36 years. I first learned of the dog park committee just 10 days ago, after being contacted by a resident of Ellsworth Village, which abuts my property and also the proposed dog park at that site. I learned that the town property that I share over a 1,500-foot common property line was under consideration as a dog park. He did not have much information except the committee would meet on December 11th. And they were preparing for a presentation with the selectmen on today's date. I contacted the Brookside Shops Management Company, whose mall also abuts the town property. They also had not been contacted by the committee. This seems inexplicable, since the mall property must be crossed to access the town property. There is a right-of-way through that. That property also abuts Estabrook Road, but it is all wetland area across there, so you couldn't put access across the wetlands. I went to the Acton Dog Park Committee meeting on December 11th. During citizens' concerns, I attempted to find out about the site selection process and also the site selection criteria, but was interrupted after 4.5 minutes that they were too, quote, busy to listen to my concerns. I attempted to ask why they hadn't contacted abutters, but was told they had been too busy to do that. That they had done community outreach, which they've shown here, which included a table at town meeting and an article in the Beacon, which they didn't list. But what about neighborhood or abutter outreach? There was none. But for some reason, the committee had contacted the Mall's Merchant Association, which didn't seem to have any problem with it, but they're not authorized to make decisions about the site or access to the site. I still don't understand why they didn't bother just speaking to, once again, either the mall owner or the management company, which the town government has been in regular contact with for years. In the 6 days since my 4.5 minutes with the dog park committee, I've had 3 phone calls from the mall's management company concerning this selection process and how they're impacted by it. I have not had any calls from the dog park committee during that time. I know the Acton Planning Board and Planning Department have my phone number and email address. I know Tom Tidman, who has met with the committee, also has my phone number. I'm not very difficult to reach. And I also know that the management company at the mall also is not difficult to reach. I don't know what the process has been with the other sites being considered, but if the method is similar to what I think they are doing, I think there's probably a problem. Usually you have an established process, you have an established criteria for selection, you have a matrix which you go through and evaluate each site. I haven't seen a matrix in which that's been done. I've only been working with the state for 36 years, in which I also have been involved with site selection of over 24 sites. In today's dollars, the construction on those sites would be over $250 million. I do know something about site selection, and from what I have seen, what little I have seen, causes me a fair amount of concern. The sites I've been involved with have included prisons, jails, courthouses, not easy sites to get through. Only one site of all of those did we have a real issue with, and it didn't involve neighborhoods. I would also suggest that you might want to look at the Stanton Foundation site, which is online, because they do list requirements. And I believe one of the requirements is roughly a site of 2 to 3 acres. That might raise some issues, especially where they're counting on that site to be surrounded by a 4-foot to 8-foot high fence. I would suggest that what you might want to do is take a little bit of time and have the committee go back and at least compile the information so it's available so people can understand what the process has been, and have a matrix so you can see how the different sites, even though they've put pros and cons, they don't have it symmetrically located on a matrix so you can follow them through. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. I hope
Thank you, Mr. Nolan.
someone has some time for butters, though, in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Just note that this is not the end of a process, and the board will not be voting on any issues related to a site tonight.
No, I'm just, can I just respond to a couple points? May I? Just briefly. I would just like to point out a couple inaccuracies in the statement that you just heard. The minutes of our meeting of December 11th will reflect that the gentleman that spoke before me was given 20 minutes. When we had only slated 5, we gave him 20 minutes, and the minutes will reflect that. Secondly, the committee did not contact the merchants. We were informed by Matt Selby that he had been, as the economic development manager, that he had spoken informally with the merchants. I have had some conversations with Brookside Shops in the recent couple days, which I can talk to you about at some other point. Also, for the reasons cited in our presentation, that's why we did not reach out to any abutters. We did not feel that it was appropriate for us to do that at this time, since we were not asked to do anything except for to report back to the board. Stanton Foundation does not require 2 to 3 acres. It is recommended, it is not required. And all of our minutes are online, and they are up to date if anybody wants to read any more about our process. Thank you.
Thank you. Other citizens?
Tara Fredericks, West Acton. So I hope that any sites that are considered moving forward, that we spend the money as a town to send out abutters notices, to just let people know, because I'm sad that 1,500-foot border neighbor wasn't even aware until just recently, because this has been going on for a couple of years, and I'm really excited. I love the idea of a park, and that's actually why I stood up. And I'm very much in support. I love the idea of the walk-up property, because I like the idea of coming down off of the exit ramp and seeing people there, because it seems very inviting, and that it would be like, here's a bunch of people gathering, and that's exciting. And I think it's a lot more accessible than perhaps other sites, because a lot of the folks that could really benefit have issues, mobility issues. I don't want to start calling the 348 Main Street property the Main Street Committee, I'm sorry, the Main Street, 348 Main Street Committee, the Main Street Committee, because there's a lot of Main Street, and they're really formed to deal with just that.
We have an
parcel.
official name. It's a 348 to 364 Main Street Master Planning Committee. Nobody's changing the name.
Thank you. Not a
For this
name with-
purpose tonight,
Thank
I
you.
will not say that every time.
And not the name with W that nobody wants to say. And then the last thing is that, yes, I do feel like it should be a town meeting vote because it is a change of use, and land use is, you know, an important authority under law, and we don't want to abuse our authority. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Andrew Roberts of 87 Hammond Street. Before moving to Acton, I lived in Boulder County, Colorado for 9 years. They have many dog parks there. I found the experience of having a dog park where I can bring my dog to run around, have a good time, to socialize with other dog owners, to be a very enjoyable experience. I would recommend to the planning committee that consider large dog and small dog areas to separate the two. That was one of the features that I thought was well planned out. I appreciate the amount of work you guys put into this. What I assume to be your own personal time, that's a great commitment, and I appreciate it. And I just wanted to speak in my favor of whatever site you guys choose is the best for the town. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, just to reiterate tonight, this is not the end, it's the middle of a long process. So I think I had kind of offered some comments and thoughts to the committee back that I think their next step is maybe narrowing down, and once they've narrowed down the sites, to have a public forum with some more details and to answer some of those questions. And that's the point that I think you start doing abutter and other outreach to specific impacted folks, whether, depending on where that is, who that would be. So that's generally my recommendation for next steps. Does anybody have any concerns with that or other things they would like to add?
A public forum next.
I think so. I mean, it's, yeah, if you're at the point where you have, with more detail, yeah, right, and there's, work to do before that, but, yeah. And you can start the fundraising at any point. I hesitate sometimes to I think it's probably better once you have a site to do the fundraising, but yeah, coming up with what those ideas are, because it can be difficult to raise $25,000, but I'm sure you know that. So, okay, great, excellent. Well, thank you very much for coming. Hopefully that's some good going forward advice, and we'll hear from you as you continue along. Thank you. Okay, so next is item 7, the board to vote to open the warrant for annual town meeting. Mr. Manager, do you want to talk about the sort of timeline for that?
Yes, thank you. So in the meeting packet, we prepared a draft timeline for your consideration. The first item on the timeline is for your consideration and request that you open the warrant for the annual town meeting tonight. And then each of the events lay out the processes that we need to follow throughout the budget season leading up to town meeting. On the timeline that was presented in your packet, we show that the warrant was to close, or we suggested that the warrant may close on January 7th. Over the weekend, we thought more about it, and we're recommending that the warrant close on the 28th of January. That is the only change from what was in the packet that is before you tonight. The only other thing that we'd like to do is just make it clear for your purposes which meeting the vote needs to be made. It looks like we need to have the board vote on the budget on that meeting on the 28th, unless there's a special meeting called.
January 28th?
Yes, so that same night, because it needs to be submitted 60 days before town meeting.
To finance.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that we would add, those two things. Board of Selectmen, close the warrant and vote on the budget.
And then as a note for others, I think, was there a date in here about when we would do our, recommendations probably at the meeting on the March 4th, because they're due by the 7th. So that's when we would probably do the recommendations for the articles. And just so people know, a few articles that I know about, so the schools are asking for, in addition to their general operating budget, a separate article related to no, not for the school project, actually. It's related to a two-thirds vote to bond
For their capital
money
plan.
for their capital projects, which you can read a little bit about in my Selectmen reports, and I can answer questions about, or you can ask the school committee, or attend their budget Saturday and learn more about as well. But they're proposing to bond money related to capital projects that aren't the school building project. So that would be a separate warrant article, so there'd be two related to the schools. The Historical Commission will likely have an article related to the chapter and demolition delay bylaw that they've been working on for a number of years at this point, and we almost brought to the special town meeting, but are saving for annual town meeting. So that's another one, at least from my committees, that I know about. So if there are other ones from any of your committees that you've heard about, I think it would be helpful to make sure the town manager and Mark and I know, just so we have placeholders in there. And then there will likely be some citizens petitions as well. But this is making clear the timeline for that, I think, is helpful for folks as well, so they would know when they would have to get in signatures for any proposed citizens petition. So did anybody have questions on that before we take a vote?
I just wanted to say I like this.
Yeah, it's helpful.
When I was chairman the first time, I tried to put together a schedule because I was counting that. But of course, I dropped it in the process of getting too busy being chairman. So I think this is a great idea. It's very helpful even for people who have been on the board for a while, so.
Thanks for Mark for putting it together.
Yeah, no, it's very helpful. There's a lot of dates involved in this, and I think people don't realize all of the requirements and different dates, so it was extremely helpful to see. John?
So with closing the warrant, the 28th would be the last day that warrant articles can be submitted?
Right. Oh, no.
It's just the last date that petitions can be filed with 10 signatures. The board can add articles anytime.
Right.
Okay. The warrant simply means the 10 signatures.
Right.
But I do think if you know of any other articles that like your committees want or something, it's helpful to know those.
Okay.
Yeah, so, because adding those gets harder as you get closer, so consider it a strong suggested deadline for everybody. Okay, any other questions? Then can I have a motion to open the warrant for annual town meeting? Does one of you want a second?
Second.
Okay, so John moved and Joan second to open the warrant for annual town meeting. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Okay. Last item is to discussion about designating a member to represent the board in discussions with the Acton Water District. The Acton Water District commissioners, the Acton Water District and the town are moving to intervene in the litigation between Concord and Littleton related to Nagog Pond, and the Water District commissioners at one of their recent meetings discussed forming a sort of, not an official committee, but having one member of the commissioners and one member of the Board of Selectmen designated as the kind of point people to be able to discuss those issues with the respective councils and staff of the town and water district. And so we would like to tonight just discuss who from this board would be that person. So Janet, I know you've had the initial discussions with one of the
Yeah, and
commissioners.
I'm taking myself out of the running because I have a feeling that this role could continue past April, and I don't see the point of getting involved. I mean, I'm obviously interested in the issues, and I have a lot of background in it, but I think in fairness to the board and the town that one of the people who will be continuing on the board should take the role. So I'm going to let you all arm wrestle. So.
I will also take myself out, even though I have not officially made my announcement at tonight's meeting, but have strongly suggested that my announcement in January will indicate that I will not be on the board. So out of the three of you, I know, Peter, you were the person who, one of the members in the initial NAGOG. John and Joan, you're a little bit newer, but we're involved in this issue. So have at it if you want to do it or don't want to do it. Just let us know so we can pick one member. Peter?
Do we have any idea how much time this is going to involve? Have we actually filed have we intervened in the lawsuit at this point? Or?
We're not sure of the time commitment of this, but I expect it to be a few meetings this winter, and maybe we can take it from there.
Yeah, really kind of depends on where it goes.
I'll leave it up to John. I mean, it's up to you what you want to do. Or Joan, for that matter.
No, I nominate John.
I would be very happy to take it on unless you were.
No, I'm fine with that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Pays to be the new guy. Okay, do you want a formal vote on that, or can we just acknowledge that we've appointed? Do you want to formally vote, John?
I'll email Erica and copy you, and is that what you're asking? Yeah.
No, I'm asking if you want to formally vote to appoint John, or just...
No,
okay,
no.
Yeah, then
And
I think that's
I'll
fine.
just email Erica anyway and let her know that
Okay.
it's done.
All right, so John Menson, you will take over that role for us. Excellent, thank you. Okay, seeing no other items on our agenda, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Janet moves, Joan seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much, and happy holidays, everybody.